G'day, folks. Welcome to Faction Focus. You're here with the coach, and we're going to talk all things Disciples of Tzeentch. And I have got probably the greatest oracles of Tzeentch that have come out of the Silver Towers to talk to us about building our Tzeentch force. It's got a new book. We're on the second edition of Disciples of Tzeentch, and there are no better people than, first things first, I'll introduce Chris Caves Jr. He is a wonderful player who has an amazing track record. I'm looking back. Essentially, he was born out of the nest of Tzeentch. Like, this guy's been playing for a long time. He's been doing really well. I'm looking, defeating people at, coming number one at Frozen Empires, number one in Age of Sigmar GT in January. This guy knows his stuff. Chris, how are you, sir?
Yeah, I'm good.
Anything you want to add to that, or anything we want to know? How long have you been playing Tzeentch for, and what do we need to know about Chris?
I've been playing Tzeentch. I can remember back when, before Age of Sigmar had points, and first thing I picked up was a cohort of Tzeentch, where all your wizards got an extra spell, which was so pointless because pinks could only cast Arcane Bolts and Mystic Shields. There was no spell lures. But even before that, in Fantasy and all that, I've been playing Demons of Chaos, as they were known.
Old school, but it's good to have you here. Thanks for splitting out from the pinks to the blues to be here with us today. And then we also have the man who was on the first version of this video. It is Ash McEwan. Ash has done incredibly well, coming in 5th at Call to Glory, which was the world's largest Age of Sigmar event, like 220 players. This guy knows his stuff. He's been playing again many, many years now. No stranger to the Sydney scene. Ash, how are you today, sir?
Good, thanks, Coach. How we doing?
Good, mate, good. This coronavirus is stopping us from playing, but I remember seeing you playing with this new battletome when it very first came out, and you gave Chris Welfare a little bit of a headache summoning that Lord of Change from the less optimal version of Tzeentch. So I can't wait to hear what you've learned since that very first game.
Yeah, less optimal, also known as Friendly Tzeentch. Feel free to share that around on Twitter. That's where we're at. Anyone that plays the Acolyte side of the Tzeentch book is all, that's the Friendly Tzeentch side, I think.
Yeah, hashtag Friendly Tzeentch. Don't worry about those pink horrors. It's about the Friendly Tzeentch.
Oh, you can throw them on if you've got the Gaunt Summoner there spare, but you wouldn't start with them on the table.
But Ash, you've been playing with a while now, Masters level player, and, you've seen through the good and the bad. So I'm excited to see what you have in store. Anything you want to share with us before we kick in?
No, nothing much. I've been doing a little bit of work on some Tzeentchian disciples. I've been working on my my Corvus Cabal, which I'm thinking about allying into some Tzeentch armies in the near future as well. So we'll see how that goes.
I love it. The bird version of the cult, I'm sure, works perfectly in this. But we are talking faction focus. Faction focus is very much structured around how do we start to build our Tzeentch force, then how do we kind of build the list around it and optimize it, and then tap into that knowledge that Chris and Ash have from the competitive scene to understand what I can learn on the tabletop to get even better as a player. So first things first. I might throw this one over to Chris. Chris, who is Tzeentch and what are they good at?
Well, see, they're good at a variety of things, mainly spell casting and mortal wound output. That's their main thing. And their allegiance ability is sort of to determine, to make your army more consistent with your dice rolls. So they revolve around consistency, spells, and mortal wounds output, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, they're a massive spellcaster. It's something that kind of definitely stands out. Ash, any other strengths that you see in this book?
Yeah, so when I think about the Tzeentch army as a whole, it's definitely a low efficiency on wounds count for the majority of the book, apart from the pink horrors. So aside from that, you've like generally you'll start with maybe 90, maybe 110 wounds at a maximum on the board, unless you're sort of dipping into the Beasts of Chaos side. You're starting with a relatively low like average of wound count, and then you're very top heavy as well. Well, you're very much leaning on your heroes for their buffs and abilities, and again the spell casting, because that's where you get your summoning from as well.
Yeah, so very hero heavy, great spellcasters. Is it fair to say they've got a pretty diverse range when I look at the model selection? If I'm very new to Age of Sigmar or very new to the Disciples of Tzeentch, we've got some fast movement units, we've got a lot of bodies, we've got some elite stuff, we have some big monsters. We have a bit of a mixture of models that I can tap into, and there's certainly a lot of fun when it comes to the color schemes as well. There's some bright colors, you're not stuck to one particular color.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's definitely one of those armies where you can kind of go to town as much as you want to. It also takes really well to contrast paints as well. If you're looking at starting out and you're trying out like painting your first army, things like pink horrors, blue horrors, and brimstone horrors, you just chuck a single contrast paint on those and chuck some basing down, and you're pretty much good to go. And then you can take it like steps further when you move up.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I know we were talking just before the show started that you've got a lot of diversity as well, because you can tap into some of the other battle tomes like the Slaves to Darkness, like the Beasts of Chaos. So you're not stuck to just one particular book. You have a range of different models you can bring into your force. That's very exciting, at least. And Chris, what about some of the weaknesses that you find that that they have, either ones that you're trying to mitigate because they're a weakness, or things you're just not good at?
Well, most of the important stuff, spellcasters, they're all pretty squishy, or flamers. All the important stuff, they cost a lot of points, but they're only maybe 6 wounds with a 5-up save. So you need to find ways of protecting them, otherwise your army's just a big pile of mush.
So there's not a lot of high armor saves in the book.
No. I don't think there's anything which is 3 in the book, as far as I can remember. Maybe no, I don't.
I think your higher saves are 4+ on your Lords of Change if you don't dip into the Slaves to Darkness. Yeah.
Obviously you can bring some stuff in from the Slaves to Darkness, but normally you don't have a lot of high armor save, a lot of big bodies as well. But you do have a lot of wounds that you can tap into. Chris, any other weaknesses that you're always trying to worry about, or things you're trying to avoid?
Debuffs, sort of anti-casting, that can kind of shut your game down quite significantly. Other than that, they're quite well rounded generally. They can be in most they're good in most departments. If you want to go combat, you've got things like Enlightened or Zangors. If you want to go magic heavy, you've got your best spellcasters, some of the best spellcasters in the game. Or if you've got some of the really cheap chaff as well, just to hoard out the board.
Yeah. Ash, any other things that you would add to that list?
No, I mean, that covers the main things. I guess the only other thing I'd sort of say is that when I'm playing my army, so I play a relatively well-balanced version of Tzeentch. I'd say that my army struggles the most against a very skewed opponent. So it could be someone that's very skewed into combat, or someone that's very skewed into like magic if it's like Nagash, or like resilience if it's like a Petrifix army. You can potentially run into some trouble when someone is skewed more than yourself. But Tzeentch also does have the ability to do that same kind of skewing into one of the aspects of the game, which then you can then find hard counters for that as well.
It's fair to say as well, Tzeentch is not really a combat force. If you're someone who likes to run up the board and just get into combat, Tzeentch is probably not for you. Obviously, there are some ways you can do about it, but compared to, say, a Khorne or maybe even a Nurgle, you're not nearly as combat efficient. You like to take down your opponents, as Chris has mentioned, mortal wounds, shooting attacks, and manipulating the board with high movement, and kind of getting to those squishier targets. Yeah,
it's definitely much more of a scalpel rather than a punching fist.
And often not forgiving as well. It's not like, again, Nurgle, you can kind of regenerate, or you're not going to be able to, do a whole bunch of debuffs and just sit there and win through attrition unless you go through certain particular builds. But if you lose that hero, that can be devastating to your army. Cool. All right, good. I'm a Tzeentch player as well, so good to hear that my interpretation is still the correct one. But I'm sure you boys are going to teach me a few things, because you're actually putting them on the table while I just talk a good game, because I'm playing cities and I love cities.
I mean, no one's putting them on the table at the moment, are they? It's a little
well,
bit
a tabletop simulator you might be, and who knows, people watching this in a couple of months' time when COVID's over and we're all rolling dice and having laughs and hugging each other again.
Yeah, man, I envy future us.
Yeah, future us are going to be very excited to put these down. And obviously with the General's Handbook, this is being recorded in March. We don't know what's coming in the General's Handbook and different missions, but we'll talk about how to best build basically on the current build. So we're hearing Mortal Wounds are really good. We're hearing some great heroes, a lot of flexibility, movement, probably not good in combat. In
general, yeah.
So what do I get if I actually go Disciples of Tzeentch? Because obviously I can pull my models in to a Grand Alliance Chaos, or I could, build any other type of build. But what do I get, Chris, by being a Disciple of Tzeentch?
So the main thing you get is consistency. With the main thing would be your Destiny dice. So you'll roll 9 dice at the start of the game, and you can use those to, instead of rolling your dice, you can use those to guarantee you different rolls, if it's something vital like a casting, unbinding, or charge roll. You can just pull dice and it's there. It's really good for the top level gaming, where you don't have to rely on dice. You can just pull it from the start of the game. You know it's there, and it just happens.
And that's stuck too. So you can use those dice for casting rolls, unbinding rolls, dispelling rolls, run rolls, charge rolls, hit rolls, wound rolls, save rolls, anything that determines a damage characteristic and battle shock test. But you can't do it with things for things like priority roll, can you?
Yeah.
Yeah. So no priority roll changes.
No. The other thing is that it's generally used for the more important rules, sort of casting, dispelling, unbinding, charges, or saves. Something which hit and wounds are nice, but you'd have to spend another dice to then get that through. Whereas those ones, if you pull it, it's just there. You don't have to spend more dice. Make sure it keeps getting through.
And those Destiny dice are awesome. They are so pivotal to be able to know there's a particular spell you want to cast, or there's a regeneration you want to guarantee. There's a lot of cool stuff that these dice do. Yeah. Is there anything else that I get by swearing allegiance to the Disciples of Tzeentch?
The Locus, I think. -1 to hit for all combat. For all Tzeentch demon here, if you're with all Tzeentch demon units within 12 wholly within 12 of a Tzeentch demon hero, or -1 to hit in combat, I think. Yeah.
And then finally you get your covens, Ash. And there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 covens. Is that correct?
8 covens now with the Wrath of the Everchosen. But yeah, 6 in the book.
Thank you. That was kind of like the little side thing I wanted to kind of pull through. So if people don't know, Ash, what you're talking about, and they're looking through their battletome right now, they're going, what is the Wrath of the Everchosen? I can't find this in my appendix. Can you explain a bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. So the Wrath of the Everchosen is a campaign supplement that was released, I think it was at the beginning of this year, maybe a little bit earlier. It was after the Ossiarch Bone Reaper book came out. And I think after the Slaves to Darkness as well. So yeah, earlier this year. And it was basically, a narrative sort of progression of the lore that sort of explained the battles between the Ossiarch Bone Reapers and the Slaves to Darkness when the Ossiarch Bone Reapers invaded the Varan Spire. That's kind of the narrative side of it, but on the competitive and the gaming side, it also included a number of new allegiances for all of the different Chaos armies. So you had new allegiances for each of the different Chaos gods, and there was also a new overall allegiance for doing a mixed demon army.
So we've got 6 that are in this book, and then we've got another couple that are available in the Wrath of the Everchosen. So it's just created even more list diversity. And what's really cool as well is that they're going to feature and they're going to, I guess, improve different types of builds as well. So if you want to go down a certain route, they are quite flexible and they're going to help you in different departments. So is it fair to say they're all really useful, or is there a couple that probably stand out more than others right now?
There's certainly some standouts, but I think you could use all of them in competitive play and get 3 wins because the rest of the book is so strong.
Yeah. Chris, have you found the same, or have you found that some are a bit better than others, or they're all kind of a bit blended and good?
Well, they can all sort of get 3 wins, but there's 3 main ones which are the best, in my opinion. The Internal Conflagration, because it buffs your Flamers. The Host Duplicis, because it buffs your Horrors. Or the Guild of Summoners, because it lets you summon a Lord of Change on turn 1 effectively.
Yep.
And it's probably worth calling out as well is that there are essentially 2 types of builds in this book. Now, obviously, you can mix and match, but you have the demon side, and then you what's called the mortal side or the Arcanite side. So if you like, and we'll talk about those units, but you'll start to see if you like Zangors or if you like Pink Horrors or you like Screamers, you'll start to see these kind of, and this is how we start building the list and start bringing this all together. So correct me if I'm wrong, there's no terrain piece that comes with this either. So I know some armies get an Allegiance terrain piece. There's no terrain piece for you to bring around?
No.
But what is cool is you do get some endless spells that are specific to the Disciples of Tzeentch.
Yeah.
Awesome. And we will talk about that a little bit later. But you do get a whole bunch of cool stuff. You get the Destiny dice, you get the Locus of Change, you get some sub-allegiance rules, and then you get the endless spells if you swear Disciples of Tzeentch. So the last thing we probably haven't talked about, and Ash, I might come to you because I know you are a lover of all things summoning, but you also get the ability to summon.
Yeah, so there's actually 2 more allegiance abilities that we haven't talked about yet, but this is one of them. So the Summon Demons of Tzeentch ability is your way of bringing more units to the table. So essentially the way that this works is you generate points for every successful spell that's cast on the table and is not unbound. So that can be your spells, it can be your opponent's spells, and there's some ways with artifacts and traits to sort of make that a little bit more effective. But in general, that's kind of the way it works. And then once you've got 10 points, from then on, you can, at the end of your movement phase, summon one of these units wholly within 12 inches of one of your friendly Tzeentch heroes. That basically allows you to sort of bring your extra units to the table, particularly things to start out with. It's really useful is bringing on blue horrors, just for adding extra screens. When you're playing the Eternal Conflagration with all your flamies, you bring on what's the Exalted Flamer called? Yeah, Exalted Flamer.
Yeah, Exalted Flamer.
And sort of once you get to the higher points levels, you can bring on Pink Horrors and Lords of Change. But then, like Chris was saying, when you're playing the Guild of Summoners, that's where you can bring the Lords of Change on for only 9 points. So they're actually cheaper than Blue Horrors at that point.
So, what Chris mentioned earlier about, spell casting being quite a benefit or a strength of this particular book, you then kind of get this additional benefit of all successful casts from yourself or your opponent are going to allow you to summon on, whether it's things like Flamers, Burning Chariots, Lords of Change, Brimstone Horrors, Screamers, Heroes. There are a whole bunch of really cool stuff that you can bring onto the table. Chris, any ones that you like to bring up more than others? Obviously, they all have their different place in each battle, and you're going to pick to suit the what's happening right now. But is there any ones that you prefer to bring on over others?
Depending on what's happening in the game, Blue Horrors can be an effective screen. If you've lost your Exalted Flamer, you definitely need that brought back on if you're playing Eternal Conflagration. But if you just get to 18 points without needing to screen or bringing an Exalted Flamer back on, you can bring 3 Flamers on just to help buff if you're playing Eternal Conflagration, which is what most competitive builds seem to be. Then if not, it's just kind of situational.
Yeah. So it almost sounds like you want to have some of these units spare. And if you're a new player, don't freak out and have to go buy all these straight away. But certainly once you've built that 1,000 or 2,000 point army, it is worthwhile going out and making sure you've got some of these extras so you can bring them on when required. Some of them you'll need more than others. Ash, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say that the start collecting box for Demons of Tzeentch is really good for that because you get pretty much all of these options in there, apart from your blue horrors and your brimstone horrors. The rest of, I think almost everything else on that list is in that start collecting box, aside from the Lord of Change, of course. But yeah, you can build that straight out of that box, so that's really useful.
So if you are a new player, go grab an additional start collecting box so you can bring on some of these. But certainly you don't have to have these to start playing the game if you haven't already started your Tzeentch journey. Was there one additional thing that I've missed, Ash, that you get as Disciples of Tzeentch?
Yeah, so it's the Gifts of Worship. So these are probably the most underrated allegiance ability that Tzeentch gets, and I think maybe even more powerful than the Destiny dice are. Certainly, because people are underestimating them, they have more impact on the game. So the way that these work is at the start of your hero phase, you can choose that you intend to complete one of the following agendas. And then depending on which one you choose to complete, it gives you an extra buff for the unit that completes it. So there's 5 of these. You can only do each of them once throughout your. I think you can only complete each of them once throughout the battle. I think you can. I believe.
I think once you've got ticket off, you can't do it again. You've got to change the agenda.
Yeah, but if you don't succeed, then you can try it again after.
Yeah.
But yeah, so there's Mass Conjuration, which if you've cast 2 spells from the same wizard on an unmodified 9 or more, you get +1 to your casting rolls for that wizard for the rest of the battle. You get there's also Ninefold Dismantlement, which is you pick an enemy unit on the battlefield that's got 9 or more models, and if that unit's destroyed before the end of that turn, the agenda's completed, and the unit that completes that gets +1 to hit, which is amazing on a whole host of things, but particularly on things like if you can do it with your pink horrors, getting +1 to hit on all of those shooting attacks. Same thing with flamers. Even for things like Enlightened and Skyfires, when you're going into combat, they can be really useful for that as well. There's Overthrow Leaders, which is pick an enemy hero or monster that's got 9 or more wounds. And if that's slain, then you add 1 to the save rolls of the unit that killed it. So that's great. If you can manage to kill it with your Lord of Change, get him to a 3+ save. Potentially as well, if you're playing any of the Slaves to Darkness stuff, if you've got like a Chaos Lord on Karkadrak or an Archaeon, for instance, you can get down to a 2+ save, which is super useful. There's Reckless Abandon, which is at the start of your charge phase. You pick a friendly Tzeentch unit that's 9 inches or more from any enemy units, and if that unit ends a charge move within half an inch of the enemy models, then you get an extra 1 attack of the melee weapons of the Tzeentch unit that completed it, if it makes a charge move in the same turn. So effectively on that turn, you get +1 attack, and then anytime they make a charge, you get +1 attack. So that's really good for Enlightened. Still pretty good for Skyfires, because D3 +1 attacks on their discs is useful. And yeah, any of the Slaves to Darkness and Beasts of Chaos stuff that you throw in there as well, like extra attacks from Archaeon's always good. Extra attacks with a unit of 30 Bestigors is just as good as well. And then you've also got Tides of Anarchy, which is if a friendly Tzeentch unit that has 9 or more models, now this is probably the most influential one on the game, gains control of an objective that was controlled by your opponent at the start of the hero phase. That unit counts as 2 models instead of 1 when determining control of an objective. So it's kind of like how ogres count as 2 models instead of 1. But for example, you could have 40 blue horrors counting as 2 models each. So yeah, that's where it gets really powerful, and particularly when people in the first turn generally will just go and sort of tag the backside of an objective with 1 or 2 models. If you can either summon pink horrors or move your pink horrors up onto one of those objectives and take that off your opponent, that unit of pink horrors becomes 20 models on the objective, and then 40 once they turn into blues. So that's amazing.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And it is very underrated. A lot of people don't talk about it. A lot of people talk about things like the Destiny dice, but not many people are talking as much about the agendas. So really good shout as well. Really good shout. And I think, and I'm sure you guys have learned that picking the right agenda at the right time is obviously going to determine some success, but also it gives you a whole lot of flexibility and some, I guess, goals throughout the game.
Yeah, definitely.
So we talked allegiance stuff. On top of all of this stuff, you get this thing called a sub-allegiance, or essentially you've got your Disciples of Tzeentch that gives you all these different benefits. And then you also have what's a sub-allegiance. So the thing that happens, so basically they're called a coven. Correct me if I'm wrong.
The change covens.
The change covens. If you are coming from a different army, you might recognize them. Daughters of Cain have temples. Stormcast have chambers. You have a whole range of different names for them across the different armies, and there are 8 of them. I've only got screenshots of 6 of them. I've only taken some screenshots. I forgot to do Wrath of the Everchosen. Thanks, Ash. But we will talk about some of these, and I'd love to get your thoughts and ideas on what types of builds or what some things you'd consider with the different builds. So the first one we have is the Internal Conflagration. I always butcher that up. It's like a big mouthful. But you get a whole bunch of cool stuff with this. So you're going to get some rend. You get improve the rend characteristic of friendly units with warp flame, billowing warp flame, or magical flame missile weapons by 1. So who has that, and is that any good? Chris, I might throw this one to you.
Sorry, you're breaking up.
The Internal Conflagration with the improving the rend for the warp flame, the billowing warp flame, and the magical flames.
Yeah, so that mainly buffs flamers, exalted flamers, and horrors. So that gives all their shooting weapons an extra rend, which is incredibly useful because their ability to just wipe things off the board is greatly improved by rend. Otherwise, all of that, their shooting has no rend except the exalted flamer.
And inside this particular one, you also get a command trait that allows you to subtract 1 from the hit rolls for attacks made by missile weapons that target your particular demon units within 12. You get a command ability and an artifact as well. So correct me if I'm wrong, is this particular coven one that's going to really greatly benefit someone who bases it around missile weapons and things like your flamers, your exalted flamers, and your pink horrors?
Yeah, this is definitely the one you would pick if you wanted to use any kind of flamers. If you're using any flamers, you should really be using this because it increases their damage output so significantly. And then it also, you can help defend yourself with the command trait because one of their weaknesses is missile weapons because they're super squishy. So making them -1 to hit can just make them much more survivable. And it's the one I used at the GT at Warhammer World.
And things like flamers and exalted flamers already have rend, so it's like moving them up from rend 1 to rend 2.
Flamers don't have rend.
Oh, flamers don't have rend.
No, the exalted, but making the exalted -2 is really good.
Yeah. Ash, anything you'd want to add to the Internal Conflagration?
I guess the only other thing is that when you do use that command as the command trait, that also affects that heroes, or that general rather, and also any other sort of heroes that are nearby. So if you've already got the -1 to hit against those heroes from Lookout Sir, then you get -2 to hit.
Yeah, great call. There's some great ways to stack and obviously bring in some additional rules. The next one we have is the Host Duplicitous. So Ash, what's this one good at? I can see there's a whole bunch of things here. Enemy units within 3 inches cannot retreat. There are some things like you get to add 1 to the save roll to the attacks made to by the bearer from the artifact. What's Host Duplicitous all about? Is it any good or not really?
Host Duplicitous is probably the second choice for your demon build. It's also a great choice if you're looking at doing Beasts of Chaos. So the reason it's good for those is because they've got good wound efficiency. If you're doing lots of horrors or if you're doing large sort of hordes of Beasts of Chaos units, you can use this ability where units within 3 inches can't retreat to just control the board. And if you're controlling the board and also scoring objectives, you're going to win the game.
Chris, anything you'd add to host Duplicitus?
It's mainly the main ability you pick it for is the no retreating if you're in combat with them, because that just shuts down. You can shut armies down completely because you can just charge, say, 20 pink cars. There are ways to charge 20 pink cars into your opponent, make them not retreat, and then their army shut down for maybe 3 turns, by which point you've won the game on objectives just.
Yep, and you can use your Destiny dice for making those charges really reliable. And yeah, likewise with the basic chaos, that a lot of the basic chaos stuff could run and charge, and then you just use your Destiny dice and command points to make that happen.
The next one we've got is, sorry, anything else you guys want to add to this particular one, or should we go to the next Coven?
All good.
The command ability to return a unit of horrors once it's slain on a 5+, if you get that back on 20 pink horrors, you've won the game instantly. There's just no way they can compete with 200 wounds.
Yes.
Yeah, certainly. Assuming there's a good spot to put them back in, that's definitely impactful.
Yeah.
Yeah, so keep that in mind if you are going to be building around pink horrors, and we'll talk more about how amazing pink horrors are in this game. But there's just another way to increase the potential of your pink horrors. Next one we'll talk about is the host Arcanum. A couple of cool things, Ash, that I really like about this is once per turn, so one of the abilities, the Thieves of all things arcane. So once per turn in the first, third, and third battle round, when a friendly host Arcanum wizard attempts to unbind a spell, it is automatically unbound. So you don't have to roll the 2d6, which is pretty cool. There are some other things that comes with, the spell hunters, which after armies have set up, but before the first battle round, D3 host Arcanum units that can fly get to move 6 inches. So basically, you get a pre-move before the battle round starts, which is pretty awesome. Anything you'd add to this, Ash, or what are your thoughts around the host Arcanum?
Yeah. So this one. The ability to automatically unbind a spell in the first, third, and fifth battle round is very good, particularly because those are the most impactful sort of battle rounds of the game. So first turn you can stop someone from casting a Soul Screen Bridge. Third turn you can on the Klidge priority roll you can stop a buff from happening, and fifth turn when it's sort of the dregs of the battle are finishing off, you can make sure that you've got the advantage there as well. The other one that's worthwhile noting is the Fanged Circlet gives you a free unit of 6 Screamers once a battle. So that's really useful as well. This one's really good for if you want to take lots of Screamers, the Screamer Chariots, even any of the Discs of Tzeentch as well. Really great if you want to have big units of Enlightened and Skyfires flying up the board, because you get that extra 6-inch movement on those guys. You can also throw a Wrath of the Everchosen, like an Archaeon list into this build as well. If you're going around the Archaeon, building around Archaeon, if he's your one unit that you move 6 inches, and then that gives him the opportunity to get up into combat from first turn, that's really useful.
That is absolutely terrifying that I can give Archaeon a free 6-inch move before the game commences. That's horrible, but so exciting, especially if you think about some of those deployment maps that are a lot shorter. The distance between you and your opponent are quite low, and then you get a free 6-inch move. You can almost guarantee yourself a charge, and then you've obviously got a command point if required, or the Destiny dice to then. So basically, you can always guarantee a turn 1 charge from Archaeon in some particular battle rounds.
And then you've got those extra abilities that trigger your +1 attacks or your +1 to hit, depending on which agenda you choose as well. So yeah, Archaeon can be pretty scary in Tzeentch.
Just a little bit, and we'll talk more about those heroes. But yeah, I have faced up against a Archaeon in Tzeentch, and it is not fun, but it is awesome. Anything, Chris, you'd want to add to that before we move to the next sub-allegiance? We nailed it. The Cult of the Transient Form, and that is, it seems to me very much around more of the Arcanite type. So the Acolyte build, so things like your Zangors and your Acolyte. So there's a whole bunch of things you're going to get from there. A couple of examples is what we got here. Add 2 to the bravery characteristic of friendly cults units within 12 of the general. The artifact allows you to add 1 to the wound characteristic. The command abilities, you can use a command ability in the hero phase. If you do so, you pick 1 of the units with the Clarke Acolyte keyword that are wholly within 12 of the friendly hero. Until the next hero phase, each time the Acolyte model is slain, add 1 to the dice made for that unit's change gift ability, which we'll talk about a bit later. But the change gift is also in here. So thoughts around this? I know more people are focusing around the demons than they are the Zangors and the Acolytes. Ash, I know you're coming out from the friendly side. Do you have any thoughts around the Cult of the Transient Form?
So the Cult of the Transient Form is great if you're looking to make friends and drink beers and turn Zangors, Acolytes into Zangors. For other things like winning the game and being reliable, not so much. So yeah, you've got a good way of, there's a couple of ways that you can build it. I would usually go with 2 units of 30 Acolytes and a couple of units of Zangor, and basically you then sacrifice your Acolytes to increase the size of those Zangor units. So that can work, and you can get some great wound efficiency of that because your Acolytes are only 100 points, and then that's effectively those 100 points are worth 180 points worth of Zangors once they turn into them. But it's definitely, you'd be playing 4D chess to try and make that work in a competitive setting with your opponent trying to sort of play against you as well.
And if anyone can't read the screen, the change gift that I just referred to earlier is you roll a dice each time a friendly Cult of the Transient Form Clarke Acolyte model is slain in combat. On a 2 to a 5 before removing the model, it can fight, and on a 6 before you remove that, you add 1 Zangor model to the existing Zangor unit in the army, and then some rules around that. So you get to add the command ability allows you to add to 1 to that dice roll, so it brings it down basically to a 2 to a 4, or so it makes it a bit easier to do that change gift.
Yep.
So Ash, what I'm hearing is it's okay, it's a bit more friendly, but it's probably not as good as some of that demon stuff we talked about a bit earlier.
Yeah, definitely.
Chris, anything you'd want to add to the cult here?
No, that's about it.
All right. We've got a couple of other ones. We've got the Pyrophane cult, which is going to give you a whole bunch of other cool things. So the ability here allows you to add 1 to the hit rolls for attacks made by the Sorceress Bolt. That's made by friendly Pyrophane cult Clarke Acolyte units. In addition to the end of the shooting phase, roll a dice to each enemy unit that suffered a wound, and on a 5+, it also takes an additional D3 mortal wounds. You get some other stuff such as the command trait that subtracts 1 to the hit rolls from attacks made by missile weapons that target the general. The artifact allows you to, if this unmodified hit roll for the attack is made by missile weapons on a 6, the attacker inflicts D3 mortal wounds to the target, and the attack sequence ends. So some interesting things coming out here. Again, we're going down the Clarke Acolyte build. Any thoughts on this one, maybe compared to the one we just spoke about, if I was going to go down an Acolyte build?
So I mean, this one, it's kind of playing Eternal Conflagration with the Acolyte units. It doesn't do it nearly as well. You're looking at trying to build into a side of the book that probably doesn't have as much potential, so you're struggling there. There is some things that you can do with it, and certainly like a big unit of Clarke Acolytes, when you've also got them in one of the battalions, you can get them to shoot twice, so you can potentially get a more reliable amount of damage output for your points that you've built into it than you would get from Flamers. But the Flamers in general is just a much more efficient way of doing it.
Yeah. I would agree, and it probably is reflective in the meta right now that very few people are running the Acolytes right now. They've certainly gone to the demon side. So, but again, if you know, I will put this caveat down that if you really like those washboard abs of the Acolytes and you love the Zangors, this is about a competitive build. This is not shaming you whatsoever or telling you you've made a bad hobby choice. You do you. But if you are looking at going really well in a tournament, we're looking at demons being a little bit more effective on the table. Actually, they're a lot more effective on the table than the mortal.
Yes and no. Let's hang on till the next allegiance.
All right.
If you want to build into your Acolytes and your Zangors, you're not doing one of these two. You're doing the next one. Basically.
My point remains that this is more, from a more competitive sense. We're not hobby shaming you. Do you? All right. So we'll move to the last one, so Ash can talk about his favorite one, which is #FriendlyZench, the Guild of Summoners. I'm not even going to read it out. Ash, I'm just going to let you take this one away.
Cool. So first things first, your Guild of Summoners, when you're summoning Lords of Change, they only cost you 9 points for the first one, 18 points for the second one, then 30 for the third one. You can't summon anything else. So the great thing about this is you don't actually need anything else in your sort of summoning pool. If you've only got Lords of Change, then that's great. So that's really cool. It's amazing if you build into the hero heavy side of the Acolytes, so you can get a lot of casting in there pretty reliably. You can get it to get yourself a Lord of Change on the first turn, particularly as well with the Clarke Acolytes also being a wizard now. Because they're your battle line, they're 100 points and they're a wizard. They're amazing for getting these extra casts in, so you can put that first Lord of Change down on the first turn. You've got a command ability which can add one to your casting rolls, which I'm not sure that there's much of that otherwise in Tzeentch. You can be very reliable with your casting due to Destiny Dice, but this one, not that this would affect your Destiny Dice, that is, but this one, if you're not using your Destiny Dice for your casting rolls, it makes them a little bit more reliable. And you've also then got ignoring battle shock wholly within 12 inches of the unit that's got the Brimstone Familiar, which is amazing because the Acolytes are not very brave at all. Your Acolytes are, I think they're bravery 5, and your Zangor are bravery 6. So yeah, they start to run real quick if you don't have that thing around them. But that's really useful to have that there. And also you've got the ability to get an extra command point on a 4+ from your general's command trait. So again, you'll use that for your run rolls to make them run rolls of 6. Your command points go for that, or potentially once you've then summoned your first Lord of Change, you can use the command points on his command ability, which gives everyone +1 to their casting rolls as well. So yeah, you can potentially get sort of a lot of your wizards to a +2 to cast due to the will of the Arcane Lords, and then also that first Lord of Change's command ability once you got him.
Chris, anything you want to add to the Guild of Summoners? I know, Ash, you're a big fan of this particular build.
Yeah, it's definitely the best if you're not going the heavy demon route, the extra Lord of Change on turn 1. And then the command ability for +1 to cast. Because of the way the Lord of Change's spell casting works, you change the lowest dice to the highest. So a lot of their spells are an odd-numbered spell, which would mean you need a 4 on one of the dice, which is a 75% chance on 2 dice. Whereas if you add just +1 to it, it becomes a 89% chance, which it changes from 1 in 4 times to 1 in 9 times. So it makes them a lot more reliable with just +1 to cast. So if you don't have a Lord of Change and you just have Kairos, it's really useful for that.
And we'll talk very, very, very soon about hero selection and why the Lord of Change, the bin chicken to some people, but the Lord of Change and Savior to others is important and critical to a Tzeentch army, especially in that demon route. But a great way to get more Lords of Change on the table is via the Guild of Summoners. Ash, any other final thoughts to your favorite coven, or should we actually get in and start building some lists?
I mean, the only other thing that I'd flag with the Guild of Summoners is because you are looking to summon Lords of Change, a really useful unit to have in that army is the Changeling, because your Lords of Change will get summoned at the end of the movement phase. And if you do the Changelings, I think it's called Deceive and Dismay or something like that, he sets up at the end of the movement phase as well. So you can get your summoning points for your Lord of Change, set your Changeling up behind your enemy's army, and then summon your Lord of Change behind their army as well. So that's really good for splitting their focus, and then that allows you to grab the objectives.
Yeah, great call. Great call. So we've talked, so there are two more actually, and I don't have the rules on here. I've got my little camera out and took some photos. There are two additional ones in the Wrath of the Everchosen. I probably don't expect you guys to remember them from memory, but if you do remember some, what are they, and are they good, or should we just stick to the battletome right now?
Chris, have you read any of the Wrath of the Everchosen stuff?
I vaguely glanced over it, but I can't remember them they weren't sort of top tier whenever I read them, I don't think.
Yeah, I know definitely. My interpretation was the Wrath of the Everchosen definitely rewarded more Nurgle and Khorne compared to Tzeentch. But just if the boys can't remember, that's okay. I don't expect them to remember everything. I certainly don't remember, but there is some additional options in the Wrath of the Everchosen that might be worth checking out, especially if you are going down a mortal route. Potentially want to tap into some more of the Slaves to Darkness tools. But if you don't pick up that book, that's okay, because this battletome has enough for you.
I've just pulled it up because there was one that I wrote a list for a couple of months ago which was based around Archaeon, and it was using the Cult of a Thousand Eyes. So the reason that I went for that one is because they've got an ability called Marked for Death. So the way that works is after armies have been set up, but before the first battle round begins, you pick up to D3 different enemy units, and for the rest of the battle, you can reroll hit rolls for attacks with melee weapons by your friendly units that target those enemy units. So if you're going sort of your Archaeon, if you're going the Chaos Knights, if you're going Varangard, rerolling all of your hit rolls for those units is amazing against D3 enemy units as well. So usually there'll be sort of 2 to 3 threats in an enemy army. So that gives you the extra reliability you need when you're going into that one. So that's the one that I did look at when I was looking into that, the Wrath of the Everchosen, if you're doing the mortal side. Because you do also have the artifact gives you +1 to your save roll, so that can make your Chaos Lord on Karkadrak a 2+ save with a 5+ save against mortals. And there's also the ability to heal your general when you spend command points. So that can be really good for, again, if you make it like a Karkadrak your general, or even like a Manticore Lord or something like that. So you can get some good cool stuff in there. Potentially would work with if you're going a Beast of Chaos army as well. Although no, so it's the mortal units that get the ability for the rerolls to hit. So maybe if you're going with Enlightened and Skyfires, you could potentially go that way. But in general, you'd be looking at the Slaves to Darkness.
Yeah, great shout. And there are some other things in Slaves to Darkness. And actually, you know what? I might leave it to Chris or Ash. Do you want to explain a little bit about how the Slaves to Darkness works and the markings of Tzeentch? Anyone want to pick that one up for me?
So some of the Slaves to Darkness units have the ability to give a Khorne, Nurgle, Slaanesh, or Tzeentch keyword, which will then let them be part of a Tzeentch, Khorne, or Slaanesh, or Nurgle army. So I think most of them have that ability in the Slaves to Darkness, so it's sort of like a book which can add on to any of the armies, and there's even a couple battalions which you can take in these. There's a few, I actually saw one reasonably competitive build in the Slaves to Darkness, revolving around lots and lots of Gaunt Summoners.
Yeah, we'll talk about Gaunt Summoners very soon, because boy, oh boy, do they give you a value for money when it comes to your points. But yes, you can mark things, and in the Beast of Chaos, there is a Tzeentch battalion that essentially gives your beasts a mark of Tzeentch that allows you to then bring them in. So there's some really cool stuff as well, but if that sounds too complicated for you, let's just focus on this battalion, this book so far. So we've talked a little bit about the sub-allegiances. I want to now start building a list, and 99.9% of armies start at their hero choices. Now, hero choices are going to unlock a bunch of things for certain armies, and boy, oh boy, do you guys have a lot of hero choices or leader choices. You've got the Blue Scribe, you've got the Changecaster, the Changeling, the Curseling, the Fate Master, the Fate Skimmer, the Gaunt Summoner. It just goes on and on and on and on. What I might do is round robin. I might go to Ash, then Chris, Ash, Chris. We'll kind of throw out like what's a good hero choice, why, and is there anything that might synergize really well with that particular hero? So first things first, Ash, I might throw it to you. What's the first hero that you might want to consider in a Tzeentch build?
So most of my Tzeentch armies will be sort of the 1760 points plus a Gaunt Summoner, because the Gaunt Summoner gives you 200 points worth of pink horrors for free. It's just a no-brainer. It's also a 2-cast wizard, and has an amazing spell for clearing out hordes as well. So yeah, really good value. Probably too good value. If we're being
the God Summoner once per battle allows you to summon either 10 Bloodletters, 10 Plague Bearers,
Demonettes, Furies, but you're doing pink horrors every time because they're 50 wounds instead of 10.
And the reason it's 50 wounds, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, is the fact that pink horrors turn into blue horrors when they die, then blue horrors turn into brimstone horrors. So essentially, it sounds like you get 10 wounds, but actually it becomes 50. So value for money.
50 wounds if you're lucky and they don't come back.
Yeah.
And there's definitely ways to bring them back. So it doesn't sound like it's not a static 50. Yes, you can absolutely bring back pink horrors. So thanks for that, Chris. We're going to influence everyone to go buy pink horrors. But Gaunt Summoner, great value, very strong hero choice. Chris, what would be the first hero choice you talk about?
Well, it depends on the build, but mainly most armies will have a Lord of Change. Just he's a super reliable caster, but the main reason they have a Lord of Change is sort of to fit the Change Host Battalion. If you're not going to run the Change Host Battalion, I personally like Kairos far better. Just both the Lord of Change and Kairos' spell will average 6 wounds when they're on full health. But Kairos can do 6 wounds automatically, whereas the Lord of Change would have to roll for it. And you'll get a spawn out of Kairos, which can then synergize really well with the Host Duplicitous you saw earlier, because you can start sort of chaining. You can kill a person, then set up a spawn within 3. Then you could even do a sneaky trick like cast Palisade in between them, so that you can't attack the spawn, but then you can't retreat from it because it's Host Duplicitous. So there's lots of silly tricks you can do with Kairos. But then personally, I like if you're running a Change Host, you have to have the Lord of Change because it doesn't give you option for Kairos.
So the Change Host is a battalion that basically wraps up a whole bunch of units with some benefits that we'll talk about when we get into the battalions. But you're saying that Kairos is a great selection. So Kairos is a named, essentially Lord of Change. It has 2 heads instead of 1. So you can't give it any artifacts, but it has a whole bunch of other cool stuff.
Yeah. So if you don't need to pick the Lord of Change for any battalions, I definitely run Kairos instead. You get so much more value, and he can change any dice roll. Well, it's not any dice roll anymore. They changed it to
it's the same as your Destiny dice now.
But you can also modify your opponents, I think, still, which is really nice. I don't know if that
sounds right. Let me just quickly
You
check.
always used to be able to, but I'm not sure anymore.
That's all right. We can continue away. Everyone can look at their
single dice roll. So yeah, you can definitely do that.
Yeah. So yeah, they're pretty much the same other than that, but Kairos is a bit more consistent and you get a little more. He costs 20 points more, I think, which is definitely worth it.
Yeah. Yeah, so you obviously can't give him an artifact because he is a named character, but he already comes out with a great loadout and some cool benefits. So something you consider Kairos Fate Weaver versus the Lord of Change.
Yep.
Ash, what about yourself? Is there another hero that you would?
Yeah, I think I'm going to be championing the Acolyte side of the book. Definitely the Ogreoid Thaumaturge would be my second pick for the heroes. So he's probably your most reliable combat hero. He's also a wizard who can cast a D6 mortal wound spell, and it's easier to cast than the one that's in the spell lore as well. It also heals him as well. So you got some really good reliability, sort of doing some mortal wounds. He's also then really good in combat, and there's a spell in the Acolyte side of the spell lore which gives you +1 to hit and wound. So effectively you've got 2 attacks that are 3 damage, which are 2s by 2s, and you've got 3 attacks which are D3 damage, which are also 2s by 2s. So you get really good, reliable combat output from him. So if you're playing any of those objective-based scenarios where it's around the heroes, and you need your hero to be able to go in, kill an enemy hero, and take the objective off them, he's a really good shout for that.
Awesome. I know one of my personal favorites was always the Changeling. I don't know. Do you guys like the Changeling? It's burnt me a few times when I played against it. I remember at the Masters, Dave Kerr had used it against me. I know the rules have changed slightly, but I always love the interactions. Thoughts on the Changeling? Chris.
You want to go?
Yeah, Chris, go.
So yeah, the Changeling main ability set up in your opponent's side of the board after the first movement phase and just pester your opponent mainly. I think, and then he's a 2-cast wizard as well, but you don't really get that turn 1. So sometimes it's even better to leave him on your side just so you get the 2 casts at the start of the game. But normally you'll deploy him, pick him up off the board, then he'll come down in your first movement phase at the end. Then he can just charge, he can do anything normally. He also can make your opponent -1 to hit and half moved. So if they've got a big block of sort of where maybe they've got 500 points in a block of Zangors or I don't know, our boys, you may get -1 to hit and half moved. They're shut down for a turn, you might lose your Changeling, but in the long run it might be worth it just to secure the objectives while they're still on their side of the board. But other than that, sometimes the Changeling isn't really worth it in your army. I've found games where I've had to just use him as a screen, whereas I'd much rather have had sort of 10 brimstones, whereas because the army just couldn't function if I didn't have more screens. So sometimes he's just a random character blocking off a side of the board in some of my games, which I wasn't really too happy with. So he's very matchup dependent on whether he's effective or not.
And when we get to the battalions as well, we'll talk about the change host that allows you to move around the board. So if you're going down the change host route, potentially this is redundant, but if you're looking for a way to get into your enemy lines, to be able to manipulate them, seize an objective, annoy the crap out of them, and you aren't going down that route, this could be an option for you. That's why I always liked it. But
yeah, definitely. And you can also stack those abilities as well. So you could do the halve move, stack that with the shackles, the soul snare shackles, so you can quarter someone's movement. You could also stack the -1s to hit. So you could do Geminids, the Changeling's ability, the Palisade. You can throw all the -1s to hit. So you're just really debuffing your opponent's ability to do anything in the game.
Yeah. Right, really cool as well as, you know, you're playing against Ogre Moor tribes or your Orc war clans that want to run up into your face. That could be a nice way to slow them down and you seize more objectives. Ash, I sidetracked you guys with my choice. Ash, what's another choice that you like from the leader selection?
So I guess my other leaders, aside from the Lord of Change, which we've talked about a little bit, I think the majority of the ones that I like are good because of the battalion that they're in. And so the Zenga Shaman is a pretty good. Actually, probably the Zenga Shaman would be the next one that I'd talk about because he's really good for buffing your Enlightened and your Skyfires. He's also potentially once a game he can be a 2-cast wizard. So on your first turn you can get those extra casts in to be able to, if you're doing Guild of Summoners, summon a Lord of Change. He's also a 16-inch move. He's got a D3 mortal wound spell. So you've got some good sort of reliable poke there as well. And he's not bad in combat because he's got your Discs of Tzeentch still. So you can do some damage with him. But the two that go with him are the two different Magisters as well. So the Magister on foot and the Magister on the Disc. So they're both pretty much the same. They've both got this Bolt of Change, which does D3 mortal wounds and summons a spawn, which again, like how Chris was saying that with Kairos, you can use the Palisade to then pin things in combat with it, which is fantastic. I'm going to definitely be throwing that into my lists. But then, so like that's really good. But the way they work really well is with the battalion that uses those 3 units. And basically what that does is allow you to recycle your destiny dice into sort of better dice. So whenever, so it's the, what's the battalion called? I can never remember what it's called. It's the Arcanite Cabal. Cabal. And it basically whenever, so you choose one of your heroes, and whenever you spend a destiny dice on that hero, you can roll a dice, and on a 2+, you can change one of your remaining destiny dice to the result of that roll. So basically, if you roll a 6, you change one of your 2s that are in your destiny dice over to a 6. So you get more reliable destiny dice out of it. So that's why I put those 3 characters into my list sort of more significantly than their actual war scrolls themselves.
And when we're going for Destiny dice, we're always praying for things like 1s and 6s. Well, 1s especially if you're in a demon build, but 1s and 6s are really where you want to be. Obviously, there's uses for the others, but the more 1s you can get with your pink horrors, you're laughing.
Yeah, and certainly the Magisters also have that ability where they're able to cast an extra spell if they roll a double in the casting roll. So you could just, if you've got 2 2s in your Destiny dice, you just throw those 2s into your Magister that's going to recycle them, then potentially change some of your other Destiny dice to a higher result as well.
Before I throw it over to Chris, I'd love both of your opinions. When we talk about the Lord of Change, one question that comes up all the time is the Lord of Change loadout. So you can build him in a variant. So you can do the Staff of Tzeentch with the sword. You can do the Staff of Tzeentch with the rod, or you can do the staff with the curved beak and wicked talons. Do you have any thoughts around how to build your Lord of Change, or what's a more optimal way of doing it, Chris?
Generally, you want to protect your Lord of Change. You don't want him up in combat, so the Rod of Sorcery is where you'll get most utility out of the loadout.
Yep, that's what I choose.
So you're thinking Rod?
Yeah, definitely the Rod. I think even from a damage output perspective, the Rod does more reliable damage, and it's at range, so it's just better.
I just quickly looked at my Lord of Change on my desk, and I'm like, yes, I've got the staff and the Rod. The sword looks cool, but putting that Lord of Change in combat is literally a last resort. So you don't want to build it to optimize combat because you don't want him in combat.
No, you can use him in Host Duplicitus to tag something in combat that's not going to kill it back, that you want to sort of hold in place. But in general, you don't want it to be in combat.
Chris, next selection. What's your next hero choice? And I have a curveball coming up after this one. I want to hear your thoughts on this, Chris.
I really like the Magister as a good build, as a good hero, just mainly because he can set up a spawn. The spawns are really useful. I played a game where I was just setting up so many spawn across the board against a Seraphon pre-battletome, but it wasn't a change host or anything, so it wasn't sort of optimized build. But the spawns just shut down so much of the board, and it prevented him teleporting almost. It was almost just in his corner because it shut down a 9-inch radius, which is an 18-inch diameter, and I had about 3 of them out. So they just shut down so much area of the board, which I didn't have to then screen with other stuff.
Yeah, that's a great shout. That's a really good shout. Spawns are great for, even if you are going to pay for them for 50 points a pop currently, they're a really good shout. The curveball I want to ask either both of you, none of you, depending on how you want to answer this, is those Underworld warbands come with a leader and a unit selection, and they're often hit and miss. I know, Ash, you're a big fan of the Nighthaunt one. I'm a big fan of Zarbag in the Gloomspite, but most of them are a bit hit and miss when it comes to bringing them into the Battletome. What are your thoughts on the Tzeentch Underworld's warband? with their leader. Have you thought about it or not? Because I always find you're trading off for points, and often these underworld warbands are expensive and don't often pay for their points. But what are your thoughts?
So this he's not bad for his points. He's 140 points, which is the same as the Magister on the disc. I think because I don't think you can put him into the hero battalion, which is why I haven't considered him up until now. I think he's probably not as good as the one on the disc just because of the maneuverability and the damage output. But he does have all the similar abilities, so he's still able to summon spawn. He's still able to do the extra casting roll on a double. So he's not bad. He's certainly not a bad choice. And if you've got him sitting around and you're thinking about throwing him into your army, definitely for the sake of setting up more spawns, that's definitely a way that you could use him.
But if you were going to run the battalion, because he doesn't go into the battalion, it's probably not a viable build. But if you're not going down that route, it might be worth considering, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, I think that's the case. I think he can't go into the battalion because of the unit that comes with him. Because the battalion just does have the keyword Magister. I think that's there's a little bit of rules interaction there that I'm not 100% sure how it would work. Because he's got the Magister keyword, but then his unit doesn't, and you buy them as one unit. So I'm not really sure how that would work.
I think you buy them as one, but they're two separate units.
Yeah, so potentially he could go into the battalion, but then they just come separately, I guess.
Sounds like an FAQ for Games Workshop.
Yeah, I think so.
Sounds like but either way, battalion, no. If it's not in a battalion, maybe. Any other heroes that you would call out here? You've got, things like the Fate Master. You've got things like the Fate Skimmer. You've got things like the Ogoroid Thermitage. You've got the Zenga Shaman. One that I love the model for, but I haven't seen on the table too much, is the Blue Scribe. Any of those kind of stand out, or would you prefer to put your heroes into like more Lords of Change or more bodies?
The Fate Master is quite good. So the Fate Master's got this command ability which allows you to essentially reroll hit rolls for all your Tzeentch units that are wholly within 9. So you take him with your Flamer build or with your Acolyte if you're going for the Pyrophane cult build. And that just makes all those units a lot more reliable. So yeah, he's certainly got a place in those armies.
I think the challenge for me is that you've got like a million leader choices and you can't take them all. And if you take lots of them, then you're moving away from the bodies and the chaff that you really need to protect them. So there's certainly a bit of a juggling act. Chris, any other ones that you'd want to call out from the list?
I think all the heroes have some kind of utility in different builds. I think I've seen all of them on the table at some stage, but it just depends what builds you're going for. I think all the heroes are pretty effective and do fairly well. They're above average heroes in general.
And certainly with the summoning, being able to bring on some of those extra wizards and extra, like even the flaming chariot, if you get to that point, you can put on those extra sort of extra damage output from your spells, and then also the extra flamer that comes from the top of that as well.
Yeah. So I think look at the War Scroll, look at who they're buffing. So things like the Zenga Shaman, if you're going down a Zenga route, that's you don't definitely want one, if not two. If you're going down, again, you can look at the different synergies and look at what this is going to support. Two final hero choices, and then we can move on unless you guys have anything else. One is the big bad booty daddy himself, Archaeon. And is there anything else that you'd pull in from other books like that Lord on Cacadras that you guys have mentioned earlier? So thoughts on the big bad booty daddy himself, Archaeon? He's a lot of points.
He's a lot of points. He's worth it in Tzeentch, particularly with the agendas. You just pile all of your agendas into making Archaeon a beast, and he just stays that way for the rest of the battle. So yeah, he's definitely worth it. You definitely struggle to fill out enough screens around him if you're sticking to just the Slaves of Darkness side. So you probably would want to either take some demons for sort of the cheap screens, or take a few Gaunt Summoners so you can then summon your screens on. But yeah, he's definitely worthwhile.
And things like the Destiny dice is one of those many reasons that, and obviously the agendas that make him a strong unit in Tzeentch. Cool. Any other heroes you'd pull in from, let's say, Slaves to Darkness? So we talked about the Lord on Kakadrak. Is there anything else like the Sorcerer Lord on Manticore? Is it the Chaos Lord on Manticore? Any other heroes that might kind of come to mind? Or
I think I used to see a Chaos Lord on Manticore, or the Chaos Sorcerer Lord on Manticore in a few armies where he did mortal wounds with his spell. I think it was you roll number of dice equal to the casting roll of 5s or 1 mortal wound and 6s or D3 or something along those lines. And he used to be quite useful going off with about, I think someone told me he did 11 mortal wounds once. That's pretty lucky, but it happens every now and again. And
I think his spell, I think it did change in the new book. I think it now does. It's basically like your Gaunt Summoner, but on 6s he does D3s. So it's basically your Gaunt Summoner's spell, but you also then on 6s do extra damage. So I think similarly he's more good at doing the horde clearing. So I guess if you don't take a Gaunt Summoner, he'd be a worthwhile take.
Yeah.
The other ones that are really good, if you're taking Archaeon, you want to throw in a Chaos Sorcerer Lord just on foot, because you can give him rerolls to hit and wound and save, which is amazing. The other ones that are useful from the Beast of Chaos side, if you're allying into a Zangor heavy army, you could throw in a Shaman, the Beast of Chaos Shaman, just to get the extra +3 to your movement on all of those Zangor units because they've got the Beast of Chaos keyword. So that's really good. And also you want to potentially consider some of the spells from the Beast of Chaos as well for the same reason that you can use them with your Zangor Shaman. You can use them with the regular Shaman from the beasts as well. And things like your Wildfire Taurus is just an extra D6 mortal wound poke.
That's a really good call out. Things like the Beast of Chaos allows you to access the endless spells that come from Beast of Chaos. You've also got Slaves of Darkness that has a couple of cool endless spells as well. So something to consider when you're thinking about building the list. So this is why Tzeentch is awesome and it can be complicated. But if it's too complicated and you're starting your journey, don't freak out. Pick something and then kind of build out. But if you're looking for some a bit more and you want to go 4 or 5 wins at a tournament, there's a lot of deep strategy and synergies you can find through all of the books. Any other hero choices before we move into our unit selection? I think you know there's probably not a lot of auto includes. And it sounds like depending on the units that I select will depend on the types of heroes that I want. Some are more have incentives like the Lord of Change, like the Gaunt Summoner, but there are some great hero selections in this book. Yeah,
definitely.
Sweet. All right. I'll take your silence as if we've covered all of them. But we were here for 10 years talking about hero selections. When it comes to your unit selections, your one and true battle line. Oh, no, you got three battle line selections. Ignore me. So you have the Carrick Acolytes battle line. You have your Zangors, which are battle line. And then your Horrors of Tzeentch battle line. Now, this is where it gets a little bit confusing for the new player. So the Horrors of Tzeentch can be built as pink horrors, blue horrors, brimstone horrors, and they all come with a different points value. If you take the pink horrors, which is the Horrors of Tzeentch, they are battle line. Is there a better way for me to explain that, boys, or was that clear as mud?
Clear as mud.
So in the old book, if you're coming from the old book, you could buy the pink horrors, the blue horrors, and the brim horrors were individual war scrolls. Now it's all kind of combined and it all kind of interacts a bit different. Chris, you want to add something to this?
No, yeah, they just kind of so if you kill pinks, you get blues. If you kill blues, you get brims. It's that simple, and it's all just part of one unit.
Yeah, and something I probably should call out that might be a little bit confusing to a new player as well is that when you bring in a Slaves to Darkness or that Beast of Chaos unit and they're marked, they don't count as an ally selection, do they?
No.
No. So they just kind of get your army.
You're effectively building a Tzeentch allegiance army. That's the keyword that you're looking for all of your war scrolls.
Yeah. Cool. So you've got your Horrors of Tzeentch, your Clarke Acolytes, your Zengors. They're your 3 primary battle line selections. Let's talk about Horrors first. They're probably the pink elephant in the room. Thoughts on the Horrors of Tzeentch? Do we take large units? Do we take small units? How many of those units do we take? Give me the lay of the land when it comes to our Horrors of Tzeentch. Chris, do you want to tackle this one first?
Yeah, so I think I said earlier that most of the army is quite squishy. So the pink horrors is the main way you protect that, because you're not good in combat. But this is a 100 wound blob which can string out about 48 inches if it went from end to end, long ways, give or take. But yeah, so it's just a big screen you can use to block any combat units from getting into the squishy stuff like your flamers, your heralds, your lords of change, all that stuff you want protected, and that's its main utility as well as being battle line.
So how does the splitting mechanic work? So I buy a unit of Horrors of Tzeentch, and I take a unit of 10, or I can take a unit of 20. I've got flexibility there. But I buy 10 pink horrors, or I buy my horrors. What happens when they start to die? Like, how does this all work? I'm a new player. I don't understand. How do you explain it to me?
So the way that it works is as each pink horror of Tzeentch dies, you set up 2 new blue horrors of Tzeentch within 1 inch of that pink horror before you remove it. So effectively what that looks like in game is that you'll as you lose your pink horrors, you'll see blues appear. As you lose your blue horrors, they then split again into a single base of brimstone horrors, which has 2 models on it. So that's kind of the way it works. Effectively, to sort of use that in game, you just kind of need to leave a gap in the middle of your horror unit or behind your horror unit so that it can't get wrapped around and sort of trapped, because then there won't be any room to place those blue horrors. But otherwise, yeah, it's relatively simple once you've played it a few times.
And if I split my pink horrors into blue horrors or blues into brims, and I'm in combat, does that allow me then to pile in an attack with the blue horrors, or does that mean am I not allowed to do that?
The blue horrors are effectively the same unit. So if you've not activated that unit yet, you get to pile in an attack with all the blue horrors as well. But if you've already activated that unit, the blue horrors are added to that same unit, so you won't be able to pile in with them.
Okay, so if I'm attacked with my pink horrors or my pink units, my little models, if I'm attacked with my pink horror unit, and then someone attacks me back, and then I turn into blues, the blues don't get to attack. It's only if that unit hasn't attacked yet.
Exactly, and the blues have to stay in unit coherency with the pinks because they are just a Horrors of Tzeentch unit.
And is that true of the brimstones as well?
Yeah, same thing.
Okay, so it's not like I can attack with the pinks, then some die, and then I get to attack with the blues, then some die, and then I get 3 rounds of combat from 1 unit. It's just I get 1 round, so choose when you want to attack in that sequence.
Yeah, it's just for that resilience.
Yeah, because I think that might be somewhat confusing, because some people might think, oh, well, I've got some blue horrors now, I can attack with them. It's like, no, actually, they're the same unit, just a different profile in the Horrors of Tzeentch war scroll.
Yeah, definitely worth calling that out.
No, great. Anything else we want to add to the Horrors of Tzeentch? It's certainly a staple. We talked about the Gaunt Summoner can bring on that free unit as well once per battle, which is sexy.
I think we've covered it pretty much. They've got an inbuilt 6-up damage prevention roll for the pink horrors. So if you do have a big unit of pink horrors, you can be a little bit more resilient that way as well. And they also get +1 to hit. Well, for their magical flames, also they got 20 models. So if you're going for that sort of really high damage output Eternal Conflagration army, you can teleport these horrors to your opponent's side of the board. They've only got 12-inch range, but you'll be 9 inches away, and so you then use those sort of that higher end, lots of attacks, +1 to hit, can all sort of stack in pretty well together. And you also add one to the casting rolls. That's the other thing, they're a wizard. So the other great thing about your pink horrors is that they're a wizard, so they're adding to your summoning pool. So the only spell that they can cast gives them +1 to hit in their shooting and their combat. But that's really useful just to get that stuff more reliable and also get your extra summoning points.
So they can't cast endless spells. They can't cast any of the spells that come in the lore. If I have 2 or more units of pink horrors, can they cast the same spell, or am I restricted to just one somewhere on the table?
They can cast their spell multiple times. So yeah, so each unit of pink horrors can cast that spell once.
Yeah. So if you're a Stormcast player, you might recognize this with Empower weapons, but yeah, your pink horrors can summon multiple times.
Yeah.
Chris, anything you'd want to add to the pinks?
I think the pinks can only cast their spell while they have 9 pinks in the unit. So they still need to have those 9 pinks. Once they drop below that, they can't cast their spell.
Yep, that's correct.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you start losing, so thinking about if you do want to tap into the wizard selection, maybe going to a unit of 20, or looking at making sure you can find ways to keep them at 9 or above through regeneration. So, yeah, great call, Chris. Anything else you'd want to add to the pink horrors?
If you can regen them, so if you can return slain models, so with the banner, if you can return 1 pink horror, that pink horror will then split down into more blues, which will then split down to more brims. So every pink you return is going to be 5 more wounds. The main way you can do that is with the banner, but then you can pull a destiny dice of a 1 for the banner and return D6 pinks. The other way is with Emerald Lifeswarm for just 50 points. You can return D3 pinks, which is then potentially 10 more wounds or 15 wounds coming back to the unit.
And yeah, because the unit is just the Horrors of Tzeentch, so even if you've only got brimstones left, you can always put those pinks back in to start out with.
And if Emerald Lifeswarm happens, it's going to take a while to kill the pinks. So while Emerald Lifeswarm's triggering, you're going to get 2 more pinks back at 1 turn, then 2 more another turn. Then by 3 turns ahead, you've got 30 wounds in the unit. Additionally, so that's another 30 wounds you have to chew through, which then suddenly turns a 50 wounds unit into 80 wounds unit.
Yeah, it makes things like the Emerald Life Swarm an incredible value when you think about it. One wound is not 1 wound. 1 wound is essentially 5 wounds when you start bringing back pink horrors.
Yeah.
What about the other 2 unit selections? So you've got your Carrick Acolytes and your Zangors that are battle line. Would you mix with your 3 battle line choices in a traditional match play environment? Would you go pink horrors and acolytes or Zangors, or do you think it's better off going all in with Zangors and all in with acolytes? Any thoughts from either of you?
So I would always put in 2 units of 10 acolytes into my army, regardless of what else I was doing with the rest of the army, just because they're so points efficient for an extra spell and also some extra shooting. So you get the value out of the pink horrors, but if you're going 3 minimum size units of pink horrors, that's 600 points. So you're already limiting what else you can do. I would generally look at going 2 units of Carrick Acolytes and then either a 20 of pinks or a unit of Zangors as your 3rd battle line unit, depending on which way you want to skew your list.
That's a really good shout, because if you go a lot of change, which is likely going to support 3 units of pink horrors, that's almost half your army done. So you're straight away up 900 points. So that's a really good shout out if you want to reduce the costs in your battle line or looking at ways to get more efficiency. That's really great. And then obviously you're bringing on potentially some from the Gaunt Summoner.
Yeah.
Chris, any thoughts on the Acolytes or the Zangors?
Yeah, so the Zangors are just good, cheap chaff. They'll get you extra fate points from casting their spell. But other than that, they're just solid, good at reducing costs. Then Zangors are really effective in big blocks. So if you've got a big block of 30 Zangors, that's 60 wounds. Just 60 wounds you have to chew through. Good armor save. It has a 6-up ignore with the shields. And has a really good damage output, which you can then buff with agendas and all sorts. So they're really good, especially if you can start getting your Beasts of Chaos people in, like the Bray Shaman for 3 inches extra move and other sort of synergies like that.
Yeah, that's a really good shout. And if you are looking for that combat punch, the Zangors probably have the best combat punch in this book. Other than obviously drawing from things like Slave to Darkness, but naturally here it's probably the best combat in the book. A lot of attacks.
Certainly the best combat in your battle line units. I think that the best combat comes from the Zangor Enlightened on Discs of Tzeentch.
Yes.
But yeah, definitely the Zangors. I would say that you would probably... I would rarely go to a full unit of 30 Zangors. I think I would go 20 as a maximum, just because of your frontage. They're 32 mil bases, and that way you still get. I think it ends up being 8 of the Great Blades, which is your big damage output from the unit. But you're not wasting your points on having sort of 20 other Zangors running around the back, not really being able to reach it much.
And there are some war scrolls in the game that give you discounts if you take the maximum unit size. This is not one of them. So you're not incentivized to go from 20 to 30. You are paying the full points allocation. So interesting point.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think... Sorry, Chris, go on.
The other thing is the Zangor's Banner, which you count up the number of wizards within 9. Then you pick an enemy unit within 18 and you roll the number of dice of wizards within 9. And every 4 up's a mortal wound. So that can be really effective for sniping a hero, especially if you've got multiple units, or because that synergizes really well with the Acolytes and Pinks, because they're also wizards while they've got 9 or more in the unit. Then you got the Gaunts, which is a wizard. Then the Gaunts are summoning a pink horror unit, which is 2 wizards. So you can really start stacking that up if you want.
Yeah, which is fantastic.
Start taking down the enemy wizards and heroes pretty easily.
And that doesn't require line of sight either, so you can do that from behind a like if someone's hiding behind a wall, you can then just use that Zangor banner to pop them off.
Yeah, that's a great shout. That's a really good shout.
So it's not a first turn normally. It's after that. It's after you sort of turn 2, turn 3. So you've got to make sure you've got your wizards close. But then the other thing is you can start benefiting from your opponent's wizards as well with it. So it's all wizards within 9, not just friendly.
Yep.
That's a good. That's a really good call. That's a really good call. A nice little Easter egg there.
Worth calling out as well for the Acolytes is that they've got the Volkarch, which does mortal wounds to enemy wizards when they cast spells. So you have to let the spell go through for it to go and attack them. But if you've got sort of multiple small units of Acolytes, because they're only 100 points each, I think it's on a 5-up. It does a mortal wound to the wizard that casts the spell. And that's within 18 inches. So if they're casting lots of spells, you can use that to sort of ping off damage onto their heroes. They also have +1 to cast and unbind just naturally because of the scroll that the adept carries. So really good for having more reliable unbinds in your army as well.
And if the enemy is casting spells, you're getting summoning points as well from it. So could be a nice little way to punish them for casting, but also you get something in return.
Exactly.
Another battle line that's not in this book, but it is Chaos Warriors. So that might be something you want to tap into. Mark it with the Mark of Tzeentch, and that's a bit of more of a high armor unit that's mortal that you can bring into your force. That we won't talk about that if you're interested in Chaos and the Slaves to Darkness. Go check out that review. I've got some specialists there, but just know that that's an option. Unless you guys have something you want to call out with the Chaos Warriors.
Well, there's a few other battle line as well. Sort of the Flamers can be battle line and the Screamers. I think even Burning Chariots can be battle line.
Great call. So, yes, so naturally they are your 3 battle line choices. But then if you take a general, so for example, the Burning Chariot of Tzeentch becomes battle line if your general is a Fate Skimmer. So that might be a reason to bring in a Fate Skimmer. A battle line for the Flamers of Tzeentch if you are an Internal Conflagration. Your Screamers of Tzeentch come in as battle line if you become the Host Arcanum. And I think that's it.
Yep.
Any of those kind of stand out we like as battle line choices?
Flamers obviously are a really good shout for that.
Flamers are just super cost efficient for 120 points. I think if once fully buffed, 3 Flamers can do 15 wounds. So 3 Flamers multiplied up to 12, that's 60 wounds from shooting at -1 rend. It just multiplies really quickly with the Flamers.
Yeah, I think and we saw three Flamers do more damage than that, don't they? I mean, maybe not on average, but potentially because they're 10 shots D3 damage. So so you got potential of 30. Yeah.
Yeah, with your range 1 as well. So
yeah. The Screamers are okay if you're going in Host Arcanum. Particularly, I think I built a list that had a big unit of 12 Screamers in it. I wouldn't take them in small units, but you can get some good combat punch out of a big unit if you're charging into the right targets. So probably that's a much more sort of niche use for them.
And Screamers fly, so that means they're going to get that free 6-inch move at the start of the game. So great for screening your opponent if they've got like alpha strikes or deep strikes, or seizing an objective early.
Yep, definitely.
What about Burning Chariots? Any thoughts on Burning Chariots as a battle line, or even just in general?
I'm not too familiar with the Burning Chariots, but they're essentially a 14-inch move Exalted Flamer. So it's an Exalted Flamer on top of a chariot. So the Exalted Flamer has 6 attacks on 4s and 3s, -1 D3 damage, but that -1 becomes -2. And then if you're Internal Conflagration, and then the 4s to hit can become 2s to hit if you're shooting the right unit with 20 or more models. So you can get buffed quite nicely from that.
It's also, I think, the Burning Chariots, you can take up to units of 3 as well. So you can potentially have, if you wanted to, you could go a big unit of 3 of those. They're the same as 3 Exalted Flamers and 6 Screamers of Tzeentch. They've got the same sort of abilities from both of those. So you can have a bit more of a flexible unit there if you wanted to go that way. It's not as cost effective as doing each of those units separately, though.
It's a nice little utility, and they've got a big base. Great to have us on the side of the board, harassing a flank, getting the best of both worlds. But yes, the 150 points currently, so you could maybe think that's expensive or not, depending on how you look at the world.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, your Screamers of Tzeentch for 3 are 80 points, and the Exalted Flame is 100 points. So if you look at it that way, like 2 out of those three Screamers is pretty much the right points for what he does, but he just doesn't have a specific role that is what you're paying the points for, basically.
Yeah. I think for me, it becomes really hard when I look at, and I'm looking at this purely from a competitive point of view, is that currently a Burning Chariot is 150 points. A Horrors of Tzeentch unit is 200 points, and it's probably about 10 times the amount of wounds, or at least 5 times the amount of wounds. Do the maths, but it's a lot more. Ash is doing the maths. It's probably close to 10 times the amount of wounds.
I think a Burning Chariot's 6 wounds. So I think you're looking at nearly 10 times, like 8 times. Yeah,
it's hard to justify that 50 points difference. You're like, you get a little bit of speed, but then when you add things like the Change Host Battalion, which we'll talk about a bit later, for me, that's why it's hard for me to look down at a Flaming Chariot or Burning Chariot.
That's not to say that you couldn't do that army and it would look amazing on the tabletop. So someone should definitely do that.
Sure, but run all the chariots. I'm a big fan of the chariots. Run the chariots, do you? But if you are, it's something to consider. Chris, anything you want to convince me on why the chariots are awesome, or should we move on?
They're good. They're more durable Exalted Flamers, basically, with a higher move, but not much more durable. So I wouldn't really take them in terms of cost efficiency. The Exalted Flamer is just far better.
It might be worth taking one to be that sort of buff piece for your other Flamers in your army if you wanted to have that bigger bubble because of the base being so big. But other than that, not really.
Some other unit selections that aren't battle line, but they are available to you, is things like your Zangor Enlighten, your Zangor Enlighten on disc, the Zangor Skyfires, the the Tzeentch Chaos Spawn. Any thoughts around? I know Ash, you were talking a little bit before about the Skyfires and the Enlightened. They both come on discs, or the Enlightened. Yep. So any thoughts around those Zangors, and then we'll kind of wrap it up with the Chaos Spawn.
Yeah, so the definitely the Zangor Skyfires are great for some long range threat. So for example, if you're playing just in a regular, so say in a Guild of Summoners army, you've got a 40-inch threat range on their shooting attacks. And if you've got any 6s in your Destiny dice, that's effectively a 40-inch D3 mortal wound poke, because you can just use that 6 for their hit roll to do D3 mortal wounds. So that's really useful for sniping out characters, for killing crew of war machines if they've still got crew. That sort of thing is really useful. They're also not bad in combat. So they get to reroll to hit and wound if no one within 3 inches is already activated. So that's quite good when you consider their discs have D3 attacks, which falls by 3s -1 D3 damage. So they can do quite a bit of combat damage as well, and they're relatively reliable with those rerolls. Now the Enlightened are kind of the other side of that, and they can go on the disc or off the disc. They're pretty good wounds efficiency either way. You get slightly better wound efficiency if they're not on the discs, but the amount of extra movement you get from the discs and the extra combat from the discs as well is well worth the extra points that you're spending on the Enlightened on discs. And what these guys have as well is they've got an ability which is kind of the mirror of the Skyfires. So it allows you to reroll hit and wounds as long as someone within 3 inches has already activated in that combat phase. So that works really well if you go the 2 units in combination into the same enemy unit. You attack first with your Skyfires, they get all their rerolls, the enemy attacks back, then you attack with your Enlightened and they get all their rerolls. So they can do a whole heap of damage, particularly with those agendas when you add the extra one attacks, because that goes onto all of their attack profiles. And they've got 3 different attack profiles. They've got the discs, they've got their spears, and they've got their beaks. So yeah, there's a lot of good combat output from there, all with either D3 or 2 damage on those ones as well. So yeah, really good. And again, 16-inch move. So you're looking at first turn charges if you want to with Destiny dice.
Brutal. And every time I played against a Tzeentch army that's running the Skyfires, they always run them in combination. You got a Skyfire unit and then Enlightened on disc. They're just a perfect power pair. I don't remember if the Zenga Shaman still brings them back on a 1, but I know they're not demon anymore. They lost the demon.
No, they lost the demon keyword.
Yeah, which it used to be able to bring them back, but you can't bring them back anymore. So either way, the power pair of the Enlightened and the Skyfires on discs attacking the same target. They've got a good missile weapon shot. In combination, always worked really well. It just depends on, do you do 3 and 3 or do you do 6 and 3? Up to you, but I always like that combination.
Yeah, and there's also a couple of, so one of the endless spells can also potentially give you an extra attack as well. So if you're looking at doing that combat style output, you can use your agendas and you can use that endless spell to sort of really buff that and get as much out of them as you can.
Chris, Chaos Spawns. Let's bring this one home. Chaos Spawns, I can go 1 to 6. They're 50 points apiece. Am I going to buy a command point or am I going to take a Chaos Spawn? Convince me I'm taking a Chaos Spawn.
Not really. You want the Chaos Spawns, but you don't want them in your starting list. You want them in from your Kairos. You want them in from your Magister. So you want the spawns, just not in your starting list, because if they're coming on from your side of the board, I think they're only moving 2d6, not far enough to sort of pester your opponent or anything like that. So yeah, you definitely want them set up in your opponent's side of the board, and you do that through Kairos and Magister.
And they're a small base as well, so it means it's easy to find that little part of the board where you're outside of 9 to bring on a spawn.
Well, you can bring the spawn on within 3.
Oh, so because most rules you force you to either be 6 of a table edge or outside of 9, so that actually ignores that rule. You just will be outside of combat.
Yeah, it specifically says that you set it up within 3. So you have to set it up within 3, which synergizes quite nicely with the host duplicitous of no retreating. So you set it up within 3. If they don't kill it they can't do anything next turn.
Yeah, the thematic reason for that is that your chaos spawn is effectively your opponent's model turning into a chaos spawn, and so that's why what they get set up within 3 inches of their enemy unit. It's effectively one of their friends turning into a gibbering massive flesh and muscle.
I like it. No. That was just an assumption that I made because, it's almost like every rule has now been updated, so it's outside of 9. Your pterodactyl, pterodons, everything is now outside of 9. Good pickup. That's a really good pickup, actually. I would have assumed otherwise. Looks like we've talked about everything. Any other units you'd want to call out? Anything that might sit outside this book that might be worth considering as a unit selection? And if it's not, it's okay.
Varangard and Chaos Knights, if you want to go from the mortal side, definitely got some good value in there, particularly when you've got the agendas. Likewise, if you're going from the Beasts of Chaos, if you're using their battalion, which allows you to make them Tzeentch, you'd be considering things like your Bestigor, and potentially even the I think it's the Dragon Ogres have 2 attack profiles. So when you're adding extra attacks onto those, you can get some good value out of it as well.
Anything else? There are some allies you guys can bring in. I'm looking at now. So Beast of Chaos is you're an ally excluding Nurgle, so you guys can't bring in Nurgle. From a lore point of view, Nurgle and Tzeentch don't get along. Khorne and Slaanesh don't get along. But you can bring in Beasts of Chaos as allies, Monsters of Chaos as allies, Slaanesh, Slaves to Darkness, and again, excluding Nurgle. Now, I always found that when I'm list building, I'm struggling for points as it is naturally in my book, in my list. Do you find that you've got allies that you'd like to bring in, or are you similar to me where you kind of struggle a little bit?
The only ally really that I try to fit in is the Great Bray Shaman from Beast of Chaos, because I do take those Enlightened and Skyfires and the regular Zangors. Otherwise, because your allies won't be able to use the agendas, it's not really worth your while.
And just for clarity for anyone who's listening to this chat, Ash, correct me if I'm wrong. So the difference between the Beast of Chaos, say the Great Bray Shaman versus let's say a Chaos Warrior, because I did mention that Slaves to the Darkness and Beasts of Chaos are allies. The difference here is that things like the Slaves to Darkness, Chaos Warriors, the Chaos Knights, on their war scrolls say that they can be marked Tzeentch, which is what makes them a Tzeentch unit, not an ally. When you look at the Bray Shaman, the Bray Shaman doesn't have that rule. You can't mark them, which means that it is an ally, not a disciple of Tzeentch. With the exception if you use the battalion that allows you to make them a Tzeentch.
Yeah, so if you're looking for simplicity's sake, just work with the Tzeentch book. It's got enough in there on its own to start out with. It'll keep you going for a good 2, 3, 4, 5 years, with enough different builds that you'll be enjoying yourself. And at that point, then you can start to move into the Slaves to Darkness is the easiest. Basically, anything that's got the Mark of Chaos key, so the Mark of Chaos ability, you can take that in your Tzeentch army. And then, if you wanted to bring any allies from, for example, the reason that they've added Slaves to Darkness to your allies pool is for things like the Mind Stealer Sphinx, the Formeroid Crusher, those units that don't have the Tzeentch keyword or the Mark of Chaos keyword. That means you can take those things in your army as well.
And there are some things that in Slaanesh, the Contorted Epitome, or you might want to bring in a Keeper of Secrets. There might be something you want to bring in from your opponents, but I always find that I struggle with points when I'm list building.
Yeah, I wouldn't take the Contorted Epitome. I know it's got that ability that allows you to force your opponent to fight at the end of the combat phase. So if you had 3 units of 9 Skyfires and then ran your Contorted Epitome up behind them, that would allow all of those units to get their rerolls before your opponent attacked, but only against that one unit. And then the Contorted Epitome otherwise doesn't synergize with a lot of the Tzeentch units. So you've got more value out of the Tzeentch heroes.
Yeah. So look for things like markings, but as you mentioned, the Great Bray Shaman is a nice little addition. You get your Beast of Chaos Endless Spells and buffs the Zangors if you're doing Zangors.
Yeah, exactly.
But just look at the builds. There are things like the Dark Oath stuff in the Slaves of Darkness. There is a whole bunch of things you can tap into that might be worthwhile. But you're probably naturally going to go with something that's going to synergize your army more.
Yeah, probably if you were looking at taking Tzeentch marked Chaos Marauders units, you would consider taking some of the War Queen or the Chief. But I think in general doesn't really work with your Tzeentch units because you don't have the right keywords.
Yeah, check it out. There might be some stuff in there. There's a lot of war scrolls, and you do you.
Yeah.
You do you. All right, so we've talked heroes, we've talked units, we've talked battle line, we've talked allies. Probably the last piece to wrap this little section up in a nice little bow would be the battalions. Now, you guys have a lot of battalions. There's like a bazillion of them. There are two of them that are the mega battalions that we won't really talk about. But is there any of the particular battalions that you really like? Maybe actually, you know what? I'll bring them up and we'll rapid fire a couple of them. See what you guys think. So we'll bring it up. Whoops. Here we go. So we've got a couple of battalions, and maybe you guys can just rapid fire if they're good or not that good, or if something that I should consider. So the first one is the Warp Flame Host, which is requiring a unit of Exalted Flamers of Tzeentch, and then 3 to 8 Flamers of Tzeentch or the Burning Chariots of Tzeentch. Good or not good, and why?
It's good mainly for a low drop if you're trying to run lots and lots of flamers. But other than that, the ability is not that great. So it's all right if you're, because flamers are one of the best units in the book. So making your army a lower drop is one main utility. I actually did run that at a one-day event recently. I managed to go 3-0 with it and with Kairos. So it's really good. Still, the flamers without change host, which is the best thing in this book, but we'll come to that in a sec. It's still really good, but this is a good alternative to change host.
Yeah, it's a good way of reducing your drops whilst being able to take the Kairos rather than the regular lot of change, for sure.
So if you're taking this, you're taking it for the command point and the artifact, and lowering the drops. You're not specifically taking that for the ability, which is okay. You take D3 mortal wounds it's basically at the end of the charge phase, roll the dice for each enemy unit within 9 of the battalion. On a 6, the enemy suffers D3 mortal wounds. So it's not that consistent, but the other stuff that comes with it makes it nice.
The artifact's also really important if you're running lots and lots of flamers, because you have to take one artifact from the guilds if you're using them. So if you're using Eternal Conflagration with that, you wouldn't be able to take the artifact Aura of Mutability, which will then give the flamers an extra +1 to wound, which means you can then start buffing them. That's the only way you can buff their wounds. So that's the only way you could get them onto 2s to wound, which is a really good reason why you take the battalion.
Yeah, I think that's the other thing about all of these battalions is there's pretty much 2 artifacts in the Tzeentch book other than the ones that are in your Covens that you'd be looking at doing. So the Aura of Mutability is one of them, and the other one is the Aspect of Tzeentch, which allows you to recycle your Destiny dice on a 5-up each time you use one. Those are the only 2 really that you're looking at having your second artifact as.
Yeah, and I'll bring up the artifacts, the spells, and things like that just after we do battalion. So, but really good shout. So, getting additional artifacts, and if you and by taking the Coven, your first artifact is certainly taken away from you and forced to you by the Coven. The second one we got here is the multitude. Can someone say that for me?
Multitudinous host.
That's literally what I was going to say. And that's coming with the Changecaster, the Herald of Tzeentch, and it's coming with 8 units of Horrors of Tzeentch. So it's a big one. And at the start of your hero phase, you can return D3 slain Horrors of Tzeentch models of each friendly Horror of Tzeentch unit from the battalion. So you are forced to take 8 units of Horrors of Tzeentch. Thoughts on this particular one?
I think it's quite good because you are getting those pink horrors back every time you use this ability. So this is another way that you can combine it with the Emerald Last Swarm and the banner. The 8 horrors of Tzeentch unit, that doesn't all have to be pink horrors. So your first 3 could be pink horrors for your battle line, and then the rest of the 6 of them could be brimstone horrors, which I think they're only 70 points when you 60 points when you're going for brimstones. So they're relatively cheap. So you can fill out this battalion without too much trouble. And yeah, you get some more resilience out of your horror units. Probably worth considering if you were going to go into the host duplicitus.
All right, so I'm not forced to take 8 units of pink horrors, which would put me straight away almost at my points. It probably actually would probably put me 2,000 points if I was forced to go that. But it's good to hear I can go blues and brims.
Yep.
Sorry, Chris, you going to say something?
The ability's really strong, but I found whenever I was trying to build lists around it, it's quite hard because it absorbs quite a lot of points. I think the battalion's quite expensive as well.
Yeah, it's 160.
You really need to take quite a few units of pink horrors to get good value out of the ability, which then soaks up far too many points. So it's quite hard to build around, but it's nice to throw in if you've got loads and little chaff units just to lower your drops, and then the ability is still really nice. Because it works on blue horrors as well. If you've got those, you can return blues, and then the blues will split into brims.
Yeah, and then obviously the pink horrors have got their banner as well, which is going to allow you on a roll of a 1 on battle shock or a destiny dice to bring some back. So you are going to bring back a heap potentially.
Yep.
Next, we've got the Aether Eater host, which is the Fate Skimmer, the Herald on the Burning Chariot, and then 3 to 8 units from a combination of different things. And a friendly unit from the battalion successfully unbinds a spell in the enemy hero phase. You can immediately heal D3 wounds allocated to the unit. And in addition, 1 friendly Screamer unit can attempt to unbind 1 enemy spell per phase. So thoughts on the Aether Eater host?
Not worth its points. I think straight and simple. You've got better options on the other battalions. Even if you're looking at doing the host Arcanum, I would still look at doing some of the other, like the Skystroll Coven battalion with some more of the Enlightened and Skyfires rather than this one, because it's 140 points and you're just not getting the value out of it.
All right, next one is the one that you've probably already heard about. It is the Change host. It is the Lord of Change with 8 units of horrors, horror heroes, Exalted Flamer, basically all your demons fit into there. And what it allows you to do, and this has been FAQ'd, by the way, so this has been updated. And according to the book, although it is updated, it says at the start of your hero phase, the Lord of Change from the battalion, if it's your general and is on the battlefield, that has been reduced to 1. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So instead of, you don't pick 2 units, you pick 1. So you can pick 1 other unit in the battalion and you remove it from the battlefield. If you do so, set it up again anywhere on the battlefield more than 9 inches from an enemy. So it can't move. So essentially you're going to teleport 1 unit. Now that's been FAQ'd. Is it still good now that's been FAQ'd, or did the FAQ ruin it?
No, it's still really strong. I think the main reason people took it wasn't because of the ability. The ability was sort of a nice add-on. The main reason they took it was because they could get their armies to 1-drop with it, because it says a Lord of Change and 8 or more units, meaning any of those units, as long as you have, as long as you build your army with all of those units in it, your army is 1-drop, which means you outdrop everyone in the game. Then the teleporting ability is a strong ability on top of that. But yeah, that was because it has everything you need: flamers, horrors, horror heroes. So you could even put a changeling in it.
Yeah. The only thing you wouldn't be able to do is take Kairos if you went the Kairos route, but otherwise all your demons are basically in here.
Yeah, it's a really strong competitive build if you're looking at, because the flamers, you can just sort of teleport things around the board. And if you teleport 1 unit, I had 1 unit of 20 pink horrors in my competitive list, so I just teleport that up the board, move the flamers up behind it, and the pinks, you've now got complete control of the center of the board, and then you've got your flamers in the middle of it, just spraying everything with loads and loads of damage.
Ashley, anything you want to add to the change host?
Nah, Chris has covered it. It's definitely, it's not my style, but yeah, definitely I can see the power in it.
It is very strong. We've got some other ones. You've got the Overseer Fate Twisters, which is a lot of change, and then similar, but it has 8 units in combination of the Horrors, the Exalted Flamers, and the Burning Chariots. This is the Chariot build, as long with your heroes. At the start of your hero phase, if one or more friendly units from this battalion are on the battlefield, you can roll a dice and add it to your Destiny dice. In addition, at the start of your hero phase, if the Lord of Change is still on the battlefield, you can re-roll one of your Destiny dice, which is a very interesting mechanic because we're going to keep regenerating and getting the best out of our Destiny dice, or at least set us up for that.
Yeah, this is a really interesting battalion and one that I would like to run at some point, because I think having that Destiny dice manipulation is very, very strong. So because this also is your battalion, it gives you that extra artifact, so you can take the extra artifact, which aspect of Tzeentch allows you to sort of reroll your Destiny dice when you use them. So you can get a lot of regeneration of Destiny dice in this army. And you do still have your Horrors, you've still got your Lord of Change, you've still got the Exalted Flamers, so you do still have a lot of useful units in there. It just isn't the one drop that Change Host is.
Yeah, and it is forcing you to go down the Exalted Flamer or the Burning Chariot route compared to the other units.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you just get the horror heroes as well. You don't get the regular horrors. So
yeah. So you can still take your horror heroes, but your battle line and filling that out, you're probably having to go down the Burning Chariot or Exalted Flamers.
Yeah.
We've got one other one, the Oracles one, which is the Kairos and 3 Lords of Change. I think that's freaking awesome. And that allows you to reroll hit, wound, and save rolls of 1 for friendly units from the battalion. So your Kairos Fate Weaver and your 3 Lords of Change are going to be able to re-roll a bunch of dice, or at least re-roll ones. I've seen this around a couple of times, but it's more for lols. Is this a lol battalion because you just want to run 4 big wizard chickens? Or is there something in this that I'm missing?
Not really. It's just sort of 4 big wizard chickens. But just before coronavirus hit, I'd gotten enough Lords of Change to actually run this, and I was about to run it in our local league. And then coronavirus hit, and it was all shut down. So I'm still waiting on my chance to get off the table.
Devastating. That would have been awesome.
I have seen a gentleman in the UK by the name of Steve Wren run that around. I think he's run it quite successfully at South Coast GT a few times, but I think he's going there for lols. But it's still great. Having 4 big birds on the table is fantastic.
Certainly the value from your Lords of Change. Sorry, what was that, Chris?
5 Lords of Change if you run Guild of Summoners.
Yeah.
That's my plan.
Yes, and certainly the value from the Lord of Change comes from its unique spell, which only one of them can cast. So yeah, as soon as you've multiplied a multiple Lords of Change, you're sort of losing value each time.
It's a bit of redundancy, but it is 4 big birds.
Yep.
The other one, so that's probably more of our demon route. Now we're kind of on the other side, which is more of that mortal side. So you got a couple there. You got the Arcanite Cabal, which is the 3 to 9 Fate Master, Magister, and or the Zenga Shaman. After enemies have set up, but before the first battle round begins, pick 1 friendly model from this battalion for the rest of the battle. Each time you spend a Destiny dice to replace a dice roll for that model, roll a dice. On a 2+, you can replace one of the Destiny dice with that roll. So that was what you were talking about earlier, Ash.
Yeah, exactly. So it doesn't allow you to add extra Destiny dice, but what it does do is allow you to change your bad Destiny dice to good Destiny dice, and this is how you can get some really reliable sort of tricks and combos going off. This is how I managed to kill the kill Nagash with Hand of Dust with the Changeling, was because I recycled. So my opponent took first turn, and I was basically using all of my bad dice for save rolls. Even though my hero was going to die, it meant that I then had enough good rolls to be able to use for sort of reliable casting that then got through Nagash's sort of dispels.
You've also got the Altakin Coven which is the unit of Clarke Acolytes, Zangor, and then Zangor Skyfires. This one's a bit more generous when it comes down to not having to take as many units. And this one has an interesting kind of boon. So at the end of the charge phase, roll a dice for each enemy unit within 3 of the units, the friendly unit from this battalion. On a roll of a 6, the unit suffers D3 mortal wounds. If any models are slain by this unit before removing the first slain model, you can add 1 Zangor model to the existing Zangor unit in your army. If you do so, set it up within 1 of the friendly, blah, 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 blah. Interesting. I can bring on an extra Zangor. So I can probably bring on, is that going to allow me to bring on a Skyfire because it's the Zangor keyword?
No, so it's the Zangor keyword, but they updated that in the FAQ to say that it was specifically a Zangor model without the keyword.
Okay, so I can't bring back a Skyfire.
No, it's just a single Zangor. So it's good if you combine it with the Cult of the Transient Form, because you can then get lots of ways of bringing extra Zangors into your units. But in general, again, 140 points probably not worth it.
The Witchfire Coven is 3 units of Acolyte and then 1 unit of Zangor Enlightened, which once per turn in the hero phase, you can pick one friendly Clarke Acolyte unit from this battalion, and it can shoot. What? In the hero, it's a hero phase shooting. I missed that hero. Yeah, so once per turn in the hero phase, it can shoot. So is it worth it? Do we want to shoot in the hero phase?
If you go a big unit of Clarke Acolytes in the Pyrofang cult, you could build into this battalion. I think this one's 160.
What's the range of Acolytes shooting?
18
okay, it's a decent range.
Yeah. But yeah, it's 160 points. So you really need to build into that bigger size. I think it's a 40 man is the maximum size you can go for Clarke Acolyte. So you probably want to take the 40 man unit and only be shooting twice with that unit. And yeah, that'd be the way you build into this.
Yeah. Finally, there are 2 other ones. You've got the Sky Shoal Coven, which is the 2 units of Zangor Enlightened on disc and 2 units of Skyfires. This is definitely going down that Skyfire kind of flying route. After a friendly unit from this battalion has made a normal move, you can pick 1 enemy unit that has been passed across, and on 2+, they take D3 mortal wounds. So a bit of a niche benefit, but it is going to bring your drops down and give you an extra artifact if you were going to take essentially 4 units of the flying Zangor. Thoughts on the Sky Shoal Coven?
It's sort of something you just take if you're already running 2 Enlightened and 2 Skyfires, just to lower drops, extra artifact, all that.
Yeah. I don't know if I would personally look at that battalion and go, "Oh, I'm going to put in 4 units of, the flying Zangor." But if I was going to take it, yeah, I agree, Chris. I could see that.
Yeah, if you were going to do it, you'd probably put it into the what's the I forget which change coven is with the screamers. The one that lets you have the 6-inch move.
The 6-inch move. You ever fly?
So if you do that, you've got a 6-inch move before the battle. Then if you've got your Bray Shaman nearby, you add 3 to your move as well. So you're moving 19. Plus 6 is 25 inches on the first turn. So you can potentially fly over things on the first turn and then charge into them. So that would be where you get the utility out of it. But yeah, you're building into a pretty niche situation there. Yeah.
And to do doing the mortal wounds is nice, but you really want to be able to snipe heroes with that. So interesting. Yep. And then finally, you've got the Zangor Coven, which is probably very similar to what Chris just said about the Sky Shoal. It's 2 units of Zangors, 2 units of Zangor Enlightened, and then 2 units of Zangor Skyfires. So again, if you're already going to go down the Zangor route, I imagine this one might work for you. At the start of your hero phase, pick 1 unit of friendly unit from this battalion that's within 3 inches. It can shoot or fight. So I imagine that means it doesn't pile in. It doesn't get to free pile. It just gets to fight.
Fight is pile in and attack.
Yeah.
Okay, because sometimes it will say specifically you can pile in, or it can say fights. So we're treating that as both.
Yeah, they've updated that in AOS 2 with the core rules. They introduced that as fight.
Cool. I just wanted to clarify that for some people because sometimes it is a little bit confusing.
So I didn't doubt that you knew, Coach. I was just
I'm always thinking about the new person because for some of these things it is very confusing.
For sure.
So, thanks for the credibility, Ash. No, but because someone might go, oh, I'm outside of 3 or I can't pile in. That's all right. We've kind of ticked that box. Yeah. Thoughts on this particular one, the Zangor Coven?
It's not great. It's 180 points, so it's your most expensive battalion. More expensive. Same cost as a change host. And you're not able to take the Enlightened on discs. It's only the Zangor Enlightened on foot. So you're trotting across the board.
Yeah. So you're probably, if you're going down a Zangor route, you're probably a bit more enticed by the Sky Shoal. But again, it depends on if you're going to build that way or not. Any other final comments here?
The ability's really strong on it to fight or shoot in the hero phase, especially if you've got a big block of Zangor. But the ability's really strong, and I tried to build a list around it because it's so strong. But once you start getting the Zangors in, the Enlightened in, the Skyfires, the points are just way too much that you don't have anything else to do with it. So if you wanted to run this in a 2,000 point list, you might get 1 or 2 heroes. That would be about it if you're running it at budget. So that's minimum sized units as well.
I was just thinking that if you were going to do that and go down a very big route of Zangors, you probably want to go the small units of 3 Enlightened and Skyfires. You probably just don't have the points at 2,000. That's a really good shout. Cool. The last thing we've got when it comes to unit selections is we have endless spells. You guys have 3 specific ones to your army, and then you've got some additional ones we can obviously tap into. Thoughts around the 3 endless spells? You've got the Burning Sigil of Tzeentch, you've got the Tome of the Eyes, and then you've got the Demonic What? I can't read that from where I am. The demonic Sims. It's the Sims. It's the game. We're going to play life stages here. We got 3 endless spells. They range between 40 to 50 points. Thoughts? Do we take them, or are things like Malign Sorcery and Beasts of Chaos and Slaves to Darkness, depending on our builds, are they more enticing a place for our endless spell points?
I put all 3 of these into my CanCon list, my Claw to Glory list, mostly because they were new models and I wanted to paint up the new stuff for the new game. But probably the only one that's got the value for its points in there would be the Burning Sigil. So I'll talk about the other 2 first. The Tome of Eyes is okay. It gives you some extra range on your casting if you're casting multiple spells. It gives you more reliable casting as well. So I think it lets you reroll casting rolls for the caster. And it gives you a unique spell that you can cast from the tome, which can reduce enemies' bravery by D3 for the rest of the battle. But with so much ignoring of Battle Shock in the game at the moment, you don't really get the value out of that for the most part. The Demonic Simulacrum's okay again, but for 50 points, you're way, way better off just taking the Darkfire Demon Rift. It's just the better choice every time, particularly in Tzeentch where you've got so many wizards around, and also if you're throwing any extra endless spells out as well. It's basically you roll 9 dice and any 5 or 6 does a mortal wound. So you're generally getting 3 mortal wounds out of that, which is not bad, but for 50 points you can get better. But the one that's really good I like is the Burning Sigil. It's got a random effect, which is something that has sort of thrown people off it a little bit. But your most likely effect is on a 3 or a 4, you get an extra D6-inch move for a unit. And that can be really good for getting your Zangors or your Skyfires, your Enlightened up the board and into combat, or even getting to objectives. There's also one of the abilities is giving yourself +1 attack. And one of the abilities is giving your opponent -1 to hit. So that all of those are really useful abilities. That it's just because they're random, you don't get to choose which one you want. I think one of them as well allows you to set up a spawn, so you can do some more shenanigans with that and the Palisade if you want to do more of that spawn summoning.
And as a Gloomspite Kids player, I can tell you right now, whenever you need something to happen and it's random, it never happens when you need it. But it'll always happen when you don't need it. So just Maybe it's a little bit different with Tzeentch, but with Gloomspite, it never happens. But embrace the randomness. It sounds like there's some awesome stuff. I just want to pause for a second on something you mentioned around the Darkfire Demon Rift. If you look at your battletome right now going, where is this endless spell? I don't see it. This is coming out of the Slaves to Darkness book. And if you're getting something with Slaves to Darkness, aka the Gaunt Summoner. The Gaunt Summoner, that is going to tap into that side of the book as well. So you're going to be able to bring in any of those endless spells. And there's certainly at least 2 of them, which is very strong. The Darkfire Demon Rift is certainly one of those 2.
Yeah, so the other one that's strong, I think, is the it's the Chaos Sigil. I can't remember what it was actually called.
I'll bring it up now so I can pretend.
Totally. It's not so good in a Tzeentch army unless you're going all Slaves to Darkness, because it does play off the Slaves to Darkness keyword. But the Darkfire Demon Rift basically it's pretty quick. It does D3 mortal wounds to every unit it passes over, and then also you get an extra +1 to the number of mortal wounds that it does for every wizard or endless spell that's within 12 inches of at the end of the move. So you're looking at, if you're in a regular Tzeentch army, like my Tzeentch army has 9 wizards. So in a good situation, you can set it up so that 9 wizards, 3 endless spells, and then it comes out and does 12 plus D3 mortal wounds to everything it flies over. It's pretty ridiculous.
Yeah, there's been some real broken, brutal lists when it comes to the Darkfire Demon Rift. So if you embrace it, you could be popping enemy wizards and heroes so easily. It's pretty scary.
And you can do that with pretty much impunity as well, because your Lord of Change can automatically unbind a spell in your hero phase. It doesn't have to be at the start. So you can do that whenever you want to as well, and get rid of your Demon Rift so that it doesn't come back and hurt you.
It's so good that Kharadron Overlords players are taking it as their endless spell in the bottle. So it's like one of the top 3 endless spells people are taking. So even order players through that little gateway are taking that endless spell. So it's definitely worth it if you're taking a Gaunt Summoner. And if you're going if you've got a great Shaman, the Bull Taurus as well is a great endless spell to bring in my opinion. We've talked a little bit about the Emerald Life Swarm being able to bring back bodies. Is there any other endless spells that you might consider in this book? I know we talked a little bit about Geminids before, and we've talked a little bit about things like the Soul Snare Shackles and Palisades.
Yeah, another one that I'd call out is your Spell Portal, your Umbral Spell Portal. That gives you that Kairos or your Lord of Change's 6 mortal wounds from 36 plus with the base around. So you get a heap of range out of that. That's really strong. I quite like using the Bellwind Vortex for an extra cast as well. Potentially you can use Cogs for an extra cast as well, which gives you also reroll saves. So if you have a Lord of Change with Cogs, you rewind time, you've got a 4-up save rerolling. If you then succeed on an agenda, you've got a 3-up save rerolling, and you can cast 3 spells each turn. So really good for racking up those summoning points.
Chris, any endless spells that you like?
Yeah, all that Ash said about the Umbral Spell Portal, totally agree with that. The ability to send a Lord of Change through the portal can just sort of kill a character turn 1 automatically, because you're also going to be out of unbind range. So then you can use Destiny Dice for it and just get it automatically. You can pull a 7 followed by a 7. It's cast. The character is dead if you've got Kairos, because you don't even have to roll the dice for the spell. So that's just instantly turn 1, nothing they can do about it. The other spell I like is Emerald Life Swarm, just if you're running any pink horrors, because normally you just return 1 model, and but if you put it on the pinks, you're going to return D3 times 5, because they'll split down. Then if your opponent decides to move it onto their units, they're just going to get 1 model, whereas if you move it onto yours, you're going to get 1 to D3 times 5, where they're just getting D3. And the other one I really like is Palisade, just because it can protect you from the shooting. So things like Kharadron Overlords, where they don't have the unbinds, it's really strong against them because they can't get rid of it. And you just set it up in front of your Lord of Change, and they can't do anything about it. They can't kill your Lord of Change, who is the beacon who teleports everything around. If you lose your Lord of Change in most games with a Change Host, you've probably lost the game.
Yeah, that's when we talked about weaknesses at the start of the game, for a lot of armies that build around that lot of change, if you lose it, you can. I don't want to say it's game over, but certainly your battle seems to be a very uphill, tough fight once you've lost that hero.
Yeah, definitely.
I will just call out, just in case that anyone got confused, the Emerald Life Swarm, you don't bring back D3 times 5. It is that when you bring back a pink horror, it is essentially worth 5 wounds through the splitting. Just in case anyone tries to put it on the table, that's what we mean. But the value is incredible, what Chris is pointing out. Obviously, Geminids as well, and there's other stuff that is good, but I think you guys have called out Emerald Life Swarm, Umbral Spell Portal, Balewind Vortex, Palisades and Shackles, a lot of cool stuff that you could throw in, but again, it comes down to the points, where the points coming from.
The other one that you can throw in as well is the Purple Sun, because you do have reliable casting. So normally it's cast on an 8. You've got that basically if your Lord of Change casts like one of his dice is a 4, that becomes an 8. So you can reliably put that on the board, which can cause a whole heap of trouble for your opponent. It can cause trouble for you as well, though.
And they're probably worth calling out. I don't remember if we specified this, but one of the benefits of the Lord of Change is it turns the lowest dice roll from the cast to the highest. So if you roll 2d6 and there's a 5 and a 2, you turn that 2 to a 5, so it makes it a 10.
Yep.
Which makes it very hard to unbind.
Another thing is that the Lord of Change can automatically dispel a spell in each of your hero phases. So you could cast Purple Sun, then immediately dispel it to make sure it doesn't come back at you.
That's nice. Good call. Great call, actually.
Yeah. And you can do it with things like Emerald Life Swarm as well, where you cast it, then pick it up for next turn if you want. And every endless spell, just to make sure that you're doing the damage with it, and you're not taking anything back.
It's almost like the first iteration of the boundless, endless spells that the Seraphon are enjoying. You're not getting it. Cool. So we've talked endless spells. We've talked list building. I think it's now I'm going to write this down for a second. It's now let's customize and tailor our list. I think people hopefully have now got a better understanding if they're going demons, they're going mortals, they're going to have a lot of change, they're going to have a change host battalion, they're going to be in the internal conflagration. Whatever they're thinking about right now, it's now like, how do I tweak and tailor it to make it great? And the best way that we can do that is through some of the additional benefits, things like these command traits, these spells that come out of our spell lore, the artifacts, all this great stuff. So with the command traits, maybe we'll just rapid fire this one. Is there any ones that really stand out to you? So there are 6 when it comes to the Acolytes. You've got the general knows 2 extra spells from the spell lore. You can add 12 to the range of the general when he attempts to unbind a spell and dispel an endless spell. It's a whole bunch there. Is there any ones that stand out from you from the Acolyte or the Arcanite hero? Sorry.
I think 1, 2, and 3 for the demons, mortals, and Arcanites are all the same on each of the tables.
The Nexus of Fate, the Soulburn, and the Illusionist.
The Arch Sorcerer, Nexus of Fate, and Magical Supremacy, I think, are all the same for everyone.
Yeah, okay.
The mortals have different ones, but
I was reading the mortals one. Yes, so the mortals have a different one, but okay, cool. So there is some commonality between some of them.
I think the main thing to note about all of these is that you can't take these if you've taken a Change Coven, and I don't think any of these abilities are worth more than your Change Coven is because it's free rules.
So I've got the option of taking a Change Coven because some things you have to. What I'm hearing is I don't have. I can choose not to take a Coven and get this instead.
Exactly.
And what I'm hearing right now is that these aren't that good compared to the Coven. In most situations,
they're not really worth. No,
yeah, definitely not really worth it. In most situations, you find that unless you're sort of just throwing dice around on a Thursday night with your mates, you're better off in a competitive build to sort of build your list towards one of the covens, and that gets your abilities stacking on a lot better than any of these abilities.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely fair, and we are talking more competitively. If you want to run whatever you want to run, do it, have fun, do you. What about some of the artifacts? We've talked about some of the benefits of taking a battalion to tap into some of these artifacts. The mortals have access to six different artifacts. You've got the Wicked Shard, so it allows you to pick one of the melee weapons. You can re-roll wound rolls. You've got things like the Nexus Staff, where once per battle in your hero phase, you can pick one endless spell within 9 of the bearer and automatically dispel it. Is there anything there from the mortal heroes that you would recommend taking?
I honestly don't know. I haven't read any of the mortal. I haven't read any of the artifacts just because the Covens are the main thing you use. The Covens and either one of the two main things, or of mutability, or the other one which I can't remember. Yep.
Yeah.
So I'm not too sure what any of these do really, but I don't think they're as powerful.
Definitely not as powerful. The only ones that are okay is you called it out, the Nexus Staff, so dispelling an endless spell in your hero phase, so that doesn't have to be at the start. So if you don't have the Lord of Chains, that's good to get that ability in there. The Time Slip Pendant can let you pile in an attack twice, so if you go for a Chaos Lord on Karkadrak, or like a Manticore Lord, something like that does have the combat potential, you could go that one. And the Demon Heart has an ability that just gives puts out 3 mortal wounds on an enemy unit. So again, if you go with that on the Karkadrak, who already does mortal wounds when he charges, you can potentially kill an enemy hero before you even attack anything in combat. So those are okay. The Paradoxical Shield can work on a Fate Master or a Gaunt Summoner on Disc of Tzeentch, because both of those units also add 2 to their save rolls if the enemy unit doesn't have the fly keyword. Or isn't a monster. So if you've got those on there as well, you can potentially get something really resilient out of a 6+ save model. But in general, you're not going to go for these over those other ones.
Yeah, that's fair.
I think in the old book, I used to run Paradoxical Shield on a Gaunt Summoner, then put that Gaunt Summoner on Balewind Vortex, and ideally in cover. So then you're getting +1 for cover, +1 for Balewind, +2 for Paradoxical Shield, bringing them onto a 2+, but then you have to re-roll the 6s. So, but then Mystic Shield, so you re-roll the 1s. So it's effectively a 2-up save. Or better.
Yeah.
Some nice list tech. The Archonites have 3 different ones. You've got the Ambitious End, the Secret Eater, and then the Spiteful Shield. Did any of those stand out for you if you were going to take an Arcanite hero?
No, none of these are better than the mortal ones, and all of your Arcanite heroes have the mortal keyword as well.
Yeah. Chris, would you agree or disagree?
Yeah, I agree with that. Definitely.
From the Demon's point of view, you've got 6 options: the Warp Fire Blade, the Sentinel Weapons, the Blade of Fates, the Soul Eater, the Phantasmal Weapons, and the Pyro Fire Stave. Any of those stand out for you from a demon point of view?
These are all like combat based weapons. Apart from the I think there's one of them that gives you something for your unmodified. Oh no, that's never. They're all melee weapon attacks. So I don't think you've got any demon heroes that want to be in combat. So no.
Fair enough. But then you've got your demonic powers, which might be a bit more interesting, which is again a demon hero, but less of a melee benefit, where you can add 1 to the wound rolls for attacks made by friendly demons. You can re-roll casting and unbind rolls for the bearer, or if the bearer's on the battlefield, roll the dice when you spend a destiny dice, and on a 5+, you get to add it to the destiny pool.
All 3 of these are amazing. The first one particularly built around your flamers, and even around just your regular pink horrors as well. An aspect of Tzeentch it slots into every army. I wish I could take all of these 3 in all of my armies.
I'm glad that you can't. Chris, anything from you?
whenever I tried out some Host Duplicitous change hosts. I'm not a huge fan of its playstyle, but I found the Wellspring of Arcane Might was really good for consistent casting rolls. Just for if you put it on a Herald, you can get more consistent casting rolls, because whenever the Herald makes a casting roll of a 9 or more, he can cast another spell. So it's quite useful to get that off more consistently. Whenever you don't have sort of flamers in your list for the Aura of Mutability. That was really useful, just to guarantee different casting rules, because the change caster can, if you give him Bolt of Tzeentch and his signature spell, he can be doing 2d6 mortal wounds every turn. But you sort of need consistent casting, which is what this artifact gives you.
Yep.
Yeah, love it. You do have a spell lore. You have 6 spells to choose from for all your Tzeentch Arcanite wizards and your Tzeentch Mortal wizards. I imagine some of them might be duplicated. You've got the Bolt of Tzeentch, the Arcane Suggestion, the Glimpse of the Future. You've got Shield of Fate. You have Infusion Arcanum, and then Treacherous Bond. Treacherous Bond and Bolt of Tzeentch were always a hot favorite in the old book. Are there any particular spells here that you most enjoy or think definitely do not leave home without?
This lore is just amazing. Everything in it is great. My favorite personally is Arcane Suggestion. The ability to make your opponent -1 to hit and wound, or -1 save. That flexibility is just great. It's an amazing debuff, but everything here is amazing. I wouldn't be sad about any of it. Maybe Infusion Arcanum, but on the right, if you have the Infusion Arcanum on Archaeon, that's insane.
Adding 1 to the hit and wound roll for attacks made by the caster. So Archaeon casts it on himself and adds +1 to hit and wound. The thing I really like about Drop Your Weapons, which is the subtract 1 to hit and wound rolls, is that there's very few things in the game that allow you to get a plus to your wound roll, which is why things like the Frostheart Phoenix are very powerful, because that -1 not only can stop a bunch of benefits, but it's hard to mitigate. It's easy to get a +1 to hit, but it's hard to get a +1 to wound. So that's a really good shout.
Yeah, definitely.
But it's one of the many ways the book can get minuses to hit. So you've got the Locus, you've got Arcane Suggestion, you've got the Changeling, then you've got endless spells, so Geminids or Palisade. So there's so many ways you can get debuffs in Tzeentch in any list. It's really strong.
Ash, any from yourself?
I mean, all of the like Chris said, all of these are great value. I think in my list I take 5 out of the 6 of these, just because they're all so good. The Shield of Fate is really useful on a unit of like Skyfires or Enlightened, probably in the Enlightened the most, because they do want to wait until someone else attacks first. So getting rerolls on your saves is just super powerful. Glimpse the Future for getting extra Destiny dice. Again, if you want to build into that aspect of Tzeentch, Glimpse the Future. If you go in the Omniscient Oracles, you can get some really good sort of Destiny dice regeneration in there, which is everyone hates Destiny dice. So if you can even play the mind game against your opponent that way, that's really useful. And just Bolt of Tzeentch for D6 mortal wounds. It's never going to change. It's always good.
Really good spells. In fact, when I read them all, it's hard to choose which one I would take, because there are such good choices. On the other side of the fence, if you're taking a Demon Wizard, you've got 6 to choose from. You have Bolt of Tzeentch, the Treason of Tzeentch, Arcane Transformation, Unchecked Mutation, Fold Reality, and Tzeentch's Firestorm. So again, when I first looked at this, I felt like 5 or 6 out of 6 are worth taking. Love to hear both of your thoughts around what stands out and why or where.
I guess the first thing to note is that Bolt of Tzeentch is the same spell as the Arcanite one, so you can't cast both of them in the same turn. But you do still have a D6 mortal wound spell there, so that's what's worthwhile.
So I can take it on a demon and a mortal for flexibility, but I can't cast it twice because it's the same spell.
Exactly.
Okay.
Other than that, the spells that sort of stand out to me in this one, the big one that I like taking is the Unchecked Mutation. So it's casting on a 6, so it's really reliable. And it basically does D3 mortal wounds, and then if any model in the unit is slain on a 3+, it does another D3 mortal wounds. So great for dealing with things like Mortec Guard, any of those sort of elite sort of high armor save units. So even things like Stormcast, because you're doing D3, your average is 2. That's likely to kill a Stormcast model, and then you're averaging another Stormcast dying from the extra D3. So this is the one that I usually put on my Changeling, just because he generally won't cast on the first turn because he'll disappear and then reappear on the opponent's side. But then that's really good for dealing with any screens that are in the way of my Skyfires or Enlightened once he's there.
Full Reality was a big one from the old book that used to bring back Zangors, but that now doesn't. So Zangors did lose the demon keyword, but that's a great way I always found to bring back additional pink horrors on top of things like Emerald Life Swarm. But you do risk on a roll of a 1, you kill the whole unit. So how gutsy are you?
Yeah, it's not usually worth it until the unit's down to a very, very low number of models. If you definitely wouldn't want to cast it on sort of a 18 unit of pink horrors or something.
Someone did it to me once. Someone did it to me once where they lost 1 pink horror out of a unit of 10, and they rolled that 1, and the whole unit was gone. It had happened against me. It wasn't me did it. Happened against me, and I laughed and I lolled. But I did feel their pain because that 1 out of 6, you're like, it's 5 out of 6 chances, but
yeah,
it's an expensive one.
Definitely once you get like that unit of 20 pink horrors, when that's down to 5 or 6 brimstone horrors, if you can bring back 6 pink horrors again, that's just soul destroying for your opponent though. So definitely one to consider in the Host Duplicitous.
Yeah. Chris, any other ones that stand out for yourself?
Tzeentch's Firestorm's really strong. It's sort of one of those spells which, if you get it off, because it is a 9 to cast, it could do nothing or it could do a whole lot. So it will do nothing a whole lot more than when it does a lot, but it has a low floor and a super high ceiling. So the average you'll do with it is 3 mortal wounds, but sometimes you'll just do no mortal wounds with it. Sometimes I've done 14 mortal wounds with it and just killed a Keeper of Secrets outright off the board one time. So basically you roll 9 dice and every 6 is D3 mortal wounds. And if you can roll a lot of 6s, which doesn't happen often, but whenever it does happen, you really notice it on the board. So it's one of those spells where you cast, you get a fate point, then if it goes off, it really has a big impact.
It's really good as well as a threat for your opponent to be thinking about, because you know that it's only cast on a 9 and then only 9 dice on 6s do D3 mortal wounds, but your opponent is thinking about that 14 mortal wounds that could happen, and so that gives you a lot of board control.
And you also try to psych them out and try to get their limited unbind rolls to try to unbind that one. And then you psych them out with something like Full Reality, Unchecked Mutations, The only one that I'm not really that interested in, and maybe you guys think differently, is Arcane Transformation. When I look at that and think adding 1 to the movement and bravery characteristic or 1 to the attack characteristic with melee weapons, because it's a hero-based one, I'm like, again, I don't really want my heroes in combat. I don't know what your thoughts are on that one, but I certainly wasn't that impressed.
So you could give Archaeon an extra attack with his sword, or you could give an Ogreoid an extra attack with his horns, which are 3 damage. But other than that, no, not really.
Well, compared to like what we just talked about with Archaeon getting the other spell, like I'm going the other way.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, nothing else on that one. I think are we almost there? Oh, that's it. We've kind of done all the spells and endless spells. And I think, is there any other artifacts that we'd pull out of Malign Sorcery? I think before we kind of skip that, we kind of ignored that a little bit. Things like Ignax Scales, Aether Quartz Brooch, any of those stand out? Or would you just keep within the book?
One I used to use was Ragged Cloak. So that gave your Lord of Change a turn where you could just say, no, you're not allowed to shoot him. So the artifact was at the start of in the shooting phase, you can just say he's going to use his Ragged Cloak once per game. then you can't shoot him at all for that entire shooting phase, which is a sort of a once per game get out of jail free card. But it was really good whenever there were 9 Storm Fiends running around the board where they could just nuke him in one go. Whereas now you don't see that much shooting, and even now he's got protection like that in sort of conflagration. So if shooting comes back into the meta, that's a consideration. But I don't know if you take it over sort of the artifacts. What do you call them? The +1 to wound for your flamers and Wellspring of Arcane Might and all those ones.
Yeah, definitely, because you're choosing between those because you've already got one artifact from your change Coven. You're looking at those 2 other ones as a better choice than most of the malign sorcery ones. Worth noting as well is that a lot of tournaments aren't running the malign sorcery artifacts anymore. So something to look at your player pack for your tournament that you're going to and see if that's even an option worth considering at all.
Yeah, really good call out. Really good call out, because some tournaments are moving away from malign sorcery now that all battle tomes have been updated. But from my own reflection, looking at the battle tome, you've got some really good choices in there already. So you probably don't have to go outside unless there's a specific reason that you need either additional command points, whether you're trying to get something that the book just doesn't have. But what I'd like to do now is I'd like to understand, and we're kind of like coming to the final chapter of this show, and you guys have provided some amazing insight. Thank you for sharing so far. Just some thoughts and feelings as I look down here at my demons of Tzeentch, and as I try to attack the War of Grey and think about Tzeentch and think about my Lord of Change. I want to know, if I was a new player, what advice would you give to me playing with my army or building my army, or like what things should I know about just learning this army? So I guess I want the basics, and then I want to go a bit more advanced after this. So what would you teach me as a new player? Ash.
So I think the main thing to know is that as a new player, this army does have a lot of tricks to it, and it will be difficult to take sort of control of from your first game. So don't get disheartened when you're struggling to keep track of things. Get tokens for your abilities. Make sure you're tracking your destiny dice on a notepad. Keep track of like what abilities worked for you when you're using them at the end of the game. Like take the time to sort of consider all of your different options. And yeah, certainly it's going to be something that it's a learning process. It's not a point-click run 4 bloodthirsters forwards and kill your opponent. You need to be able to screen. You need to be able to make use of the precise force in the right place at the right time to really get the most out of this army.
Yeah, it seems like to me you're beating your opponent with a scalpel, not a sledgehammer. And I imagine that it's almost like, it reminds me a lot of my Gloomspite kits, where there's a lot of synergies, there's a lot of nuances, and just really keeping an idea of just like your different little threat ranges, or you're like, this model has to be within 9 of this and 12 of this. Chris, what advice would you give me as a new Tzeentch player?
Yeah, just Ash said there about counter it, about sort of don't get disheartened once you forget things, because there's so much in this book. There's 12 spells, there's so many artifacts, so many command traits, so many war scrolls as well. It's really hard to keep track of. So yeah, that's about it.
Something that I'll mention, a plug that I think is relevant at this particular time is the AOS Reminders website, which will put all your rules in like a small document by phase, so you can have all of your rules. So again, Gloomspite Kits is one that has a really heavy hero phase. Everything else is kind of quick, like your movement, your shooting, your combat. But you've got a really bloated hero phase, and if you try to rush it too quickly, you're probably going to forget a whole bunch of stuff. So that really helped me. I would recommend. Maybe another piece of advice you guys can give me, and Chris, I'd love your thoughts on this, is at the start of the game, I rolled my 9 destiny dice. And I might be really tempted to either burn them all as ASAP, or I might try to conserve them all because I need them late game. What's your thoughts around the Destiny dice and when I should use it, or like how do I learn how to use Destiny dice?
So yeah, it sort of depends what you're playing. So if they can have ranged threats, so if we're talking about a change host, if you got ranged threats which could sort of hit your flamers over your wall of pinks or anything like that, you want to save your Destiny dice to protect those, because those are your main win conditions. Whereas if they don't have any of that, you can sort of spend them more freely just to punish your opponent more.
Yeah, and we've mentioned already things like if I've got the things like pink horrors and I've got a roll of a 1, I'm trying to save that for the regeneration through the banner. Ash, what advice would you give me as a new player when it comes to managing that fine resource that is critical but easy to over or underspend?
Yeah, like Chris says, it depends on what you're playing against. There's a lot of good uses for 5s and 6s, less good uses for 3s and 2s. But you'll want to use those really good rolls on the most impactful rolls against your opponent. So if your opponent is a shooting army and you can use a 5 or a 6 to make sure that a combat one of your units gets into combat with them and kills them, that's worthwhile using that 5 or 6 on that. Likewise, if your opponent has a single buff hero at the back that you can use the Lord of Change's spell through the spell portal using your 5s and 6s to make sure the spell goes off. Again, that's worthwhile getting rid of that support character. In general, you'll save your 1s for Battle Shock on the pink horrors, and that's pretty much what they're for. And I generally will try to cycle out my 2s and 3s into higher rolls for better purposes, because 3s you can use on your casting rolls, but then your opponent's got a good chance of unbinding them as well. So, and worth noting as well, when using things on casting rolls, you've got to use 2 dice on it, because it's 1 dice for each of the rolls. So if you've got a 3 in your Destiny dice, you can't just use that 3 and then roll the other dice. You got to use the 2 3s to make a casting roll of a 6. So yeah, definitely make sure that you're using the higher Destiny dice the best way that you can against the opponent that you're playing.
Would a good use be, let's say I was going to use a Destiny dice with my Lord of Change. I use a high dice, but then I also use a low dice, like a 2 or a 3, and knowing that the low dice turns into the high dice, that might be that doesn't work.
No, Destiny dice, when you use them, are unmodified in any way, so they can't be modified by the Lord of Change's ability. They can't be modified to pluses to cast. So you're really relying on those dice being useful in the right situation. So generally, I'll roll my Lord of Change's casting, because you're better off. I think your averages are better on rolling a good roll on 1 of the 2 dice and then that going to a higher roll. And I'll save my Destiny dice for casting more annoying spells. So again, I'll use doubles to cast with the Magisters to make sure that they can cast extra spells. And that's also a really good way of avoiding when you do cast that extra spell with your Magister. You can use your lower rolls to make sure that they won't turn themselves into a spawn as well.
Because correct me if I'm wrong, in the War Scroll, the specific wording on that, it talks about a roll. And that's what's stopping you from doing that. And I remember at a tournament that I was running previously where one of the realm features had an ability that if you rolled a dice, it was like Ash, you were at the tournament. I can't remember what the rule was for which realm, but basically it had like a total power, like you couldn't unbind it if the roll was a double.
Yes.
I think it was.
Yeah, exactly.
And someone had asked me, if I use Destiny dice, would that count? And the ruling was no, because it's not a roll. It's a same thing. You've got to roll.
Yeah, similar idea. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's the same concept. It's basically, if you want the doubling, you want to roll. If you want to guarantee a spell, you use 2 dice.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's some good advice for me as a new player. What about if I'm an existing player who wants to get even better? I mean, Chris, you've won tournaments, you've come first. Ash, you've podiumed, you're top 5ing. You're a Masters level player. You guys are both really good. How do I go from good to great with this army? What are those 1%ers that I might be missing in my game? Any thoughts, any ideas on how I could get even better?
So how you play Change Host is, so Change Host is the main competitive build if you're playing at a top level. There are many other builds, and Tzeentch is really strong. I think you could 5-0 without a Change Host with Tzeentch, but the main build would be Change Host is the easiest one. It's most people will take turn 1, run up the board, and try and alpha strike your opponent with load 12 flamers, doing maybe 60 damage, lifting a couple units here and there. But I found that passing your turn to the opponent is far better. So some of the English players will even put Soul Screen Bridge in their list as well, just so they can get the alpha turn 1. Whereas if you pass your turn to the opponent, they waste their turn. They can't get to you. Whereas people instantly rush to go alpha them off the board. Whereas you can just wait your time a bit. You can chill, especially if you've got Umbral Spell Portal, because every turn they don't come towards you, you're going to do 6 mortal wounds to them with Infernal Gateway through a portal. So you can force them to fight on your turn, on your terms.
Yeah, that's interesting. So what you're saying is you don't have to go first, especially if you've got the choice. Obviously, if you do have the choice, you don't have to always go first. You can obviously do it and take up the board space, especially if you've got a lot of bodies. But some of those long-range threats can make it really a good incentive to go second.
Yeah. I'd also say how you design your army as Change Host, because there's several different Change Host builds. So some people sort of run Gaunt Summoners and Fate Masters for the extra buffs. Those are nice, but once you run into the mirror match, then the lower drops is going to kick in. Your opponent takes turn 1, they lift your flamers, and they've still got their flamers on the board, potentially. So whoever gets the drop in that game will normally win it. They'll have the main advantage on it. So in my opinion, I would not take the Fate Master or the Gaunt Summoner just so you can win that matchup. Because if you do that, you're most likely, if you want to 5-0, you're probably going to have to mirror match a Change Host, more than likely. Because you're going to end up with the same amount of kill points-ish or secondaries because you're playing the same army. And if you both keep winning, then it's going to happen. So if you can outdrop them, you have a major advantage in that game. And it's because if you take a Fate Master Gaunt Summoner, it's really good. It provides a lot of utility to the list, and it's much better than what the other is. But you can already win the games you're playing without it.
Yep, good call, especially if I'm wanting to go, 4 wins or 5 wins. Getting down to that 1 drop or 2 drop, like absolute minimum drops, so I can dictate the terms of battle. It's a really good shout, Chris. Really good shout. Good consideration, especially with some of those incentives where you're like, I might bring in that Gaunt Summoner because it does bring in the 10 pink horrors, but that might actually cost me my first turn choice. Ash, any advice? Sorry, Chris, continue.
Oh, no,
sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going to ask Ash, what advice would you give me as a player wanting to go 4 or 5 wins?
Yeah, so if you wanted to play the friendly Tzeentch instead of Change Host, the trick to playing #friendly Tzeentch is that your army competes in every phase of the game. So the Change Host is very top heavy on the hero and shooting phase. People don't understand where the damage comes from in my army. All of my units are small units, threats that just ping away a wound here or there. But what it does is it combines together to create a kill zone, which can be extended from my side of the board to also hitting my opponent from turn 1. So even though I'm not a low drop, I don't actually mind if I go first or second. Because I've still got enough poke from the Skyfires and Enlightened. I've got the Gaunt Summoner on the Balewind, can do some spells. I can teleport the Changeling around to my opponent's side, summon a Lord of Change behind them, create all sorts of problems. And it's asking your opponent a lot of questions that they need to answer correctly to be able to win the game. So yeah, that's the biggest thing. If you're not I guess definitely the change host is the more competitive way to do it. I'm not denying that anyway. But if you wanted to try some of the other aspects of the army, certainly the way that you apply your force is not through one phase of the game, but through every phase of the game, and that makes it really difficult for your opponent to know where the next lot of damage is going to come from.
Yeah, and it's great to think outside of Change Host, because we are moving towards a new General's Handbook. We don't know when it's coming, and we don't know if there are additional changes coming to Change Host, because it is very strong. So it may increase in points, which may make it harder to build that optimum list. So by looking at different things like you're talking about, great call, really good call. Any other, between Chris and Ash, any other final thoughts, any tips, any advice that we haven't spoken about in almost this last 3 hours that we could kind of end the show on that I should consider, maybe we haven't spoken about just yet, or any final thoughts?
There's multitudinous change host. So the way that plays to conflagration change host is very different. So it relies on sort of teleporting pink cars up in your face, then using Destiny dice to guarantee a charge. Whereas conflagration walks up the board and tries to spray you with shooting. So this one is so Duplicitous is a lot more about board control and where you pin in, how you pin in. So just to secure the objectives, mainly until turn 3. So you can you hold the middle objectives if there are any till turn 3. Then after that, it doesn't really matter because you've got enough points to win the game.
Yeah, understand the play style, understand what it does, and then build around it. Like it. Ash, any other final thoughts or any closing comments you'd like to make on Tzeentch?
I think the main thing is have fun with it. Tzeentch is a really cool army. All the models are amazing. I don't think I think the only model in the range that I wouldn't build is the one that's made of resin still, and that's just because I don't like resin. Like the rest of the models are fantastic, and just enjoy yourself when you're playing the game. It's very tactical. It's a very enjoyable way of playing the game. It's very rewarding when you do well with it as well. And even if it's not going well, just trick your opponent with the whole just as planned. I know what's going on. You'll see later on. We've got the schemes within schemes, and this is all going to work out for the Tzeentch in the end.
I like it. Chris, is there anything that you want to close us out with? Any shout outs? If people wanted to find you and chat to you more, where can they find you? Any homeboys you want to represent?
I'm not particularly active on social media, but my on Twitter is Diceologist, if anyone's interested. Other than that, shout outs to local gaming club, my dad who takes me to most of the tournaments, Peter Pratt, who runs most of the events over here, Nick Wendell, who runs most of the events down south of Ireland, and everyone else in Ireland who does the gaming.
Shout out to Ireland. Ash, bring us home. Any shout outs? Anyone want to talk to you more? Where can they find you?
So you can find me on Twitter at Ash_McEwan. If you've got any questions about the show today, feel free to shoot me through a message. I'm always happy to answer questions, especially at the moment. I've got a lot of time. So, feel free to get into some deep conversations there. Otherwise, shout out to Clan Filth. The Sydney boys always doing good at all the events, and we're going to take out the Runax team tournament again this year if we can get there. So, good to see everyone in there.
Yeah, awesome. And I'll leave both of the Twitter handles in the show description later on once this finishes up. But Chris, Ash, it was an absolute pleasure having you both here. Two highly competitive and competent players who've been doing this for a long time now. It's not like they've just picked up this battletome and run the internet list. These guys have really honed their craft over a number of years with this particular book. And this discussion has really proven your in-depth knowledge. So thank you both. If you guys have enjoyed, guys and girls who have watched this, if you've enjoyed it, please leave some comments below. If you've got some ideas on lists that we haven't spoken about, we'd love to hear about it. And Ash, Chris, thank you again. Let's wrap this up. Get back in there, guys. Roll lots of sixes, and I can't wait to start playing again. This has been too long.
Yeah, thanks, Coach. Appreciate having me on.
Thanks, guys. Have a good rest of your day or evening or night or whatever you do.
Bye.